Okay, it's 5:30. I'd like to start this Finance Committee agenda. Call to order and approval of the agenda. Is there a motion? Mr. Denisha, second by Ms. Curran. Any discussion about the agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Approval of the minutes of September 28th by Mr. Forsythe, seconded by Ms. Curran. Any discussion about the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay. First up on our agenda is Stephen Jelly. He's the city manager of the city. Go ahead, Mr. Jelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the time this evening, board. Just want to take a few minutes of your time to appeal to you all tonight on the sales tax distribution formula. County board, City of Ogdensburg needs your help. Plain and simple. There is no other way for me to ask. I'm willing to do whatever you need me to do, whatever you need me to show you, but I need you to understand that the City of Ogdensburg is in the middle of change. Probably change that has been needed for some 20 plus years and has not taken place as quickly as it should have, but it is change that is taking place. There's a new council that, albeit some days has taken the ground a little bit too hard, forcing issues, quite frankly, that we ought to be finessing a little differently. The truth is they're trying to make change that is not going to come about in any other way. We have union contracts that have been signed for years, not just the previous batch, but for years. We've been signing those to appease employee work groups and move things along to keep peace. But the truth is those things have just become unaffordable, and we've got to work our way around those. Our ability to generate revenue stands as our #1 challenge and our #1 priority. However, nothing is going to change with that in an immediate fashion. This council may very well be remembered as the council who turned the ship around. They certainly won't be the group that sails it to daylight. Just for perspective, we are so close to our constitutional tax limits. If we raise taxes to the maximum amount possible, our real estate property taxes, we could generate by today's count $184,000. 3.2% is all we have left to go. So we don't even control our ability anymore to raise funds through the residential tax base, and we have to reduce the tax rate in the city of Ogdensburg. Our city tax rate at $20 a thousand is far and away too high. It's not the only culprit. $27 a thousand for the school tax is also very, very painful. While the county contributes to that, I would say that the county has demonstrated in the last several years a model in which Ogdensburg needs to try to emulate themselves by, in looking for efficiencies in government, ways they can reduce revenue and become more efficient by sharing services with other towns and or with the county. Total tax rate for somebody in the city of Ogdensburg is just 3 cents shy of $57,000. It makes it really, really easy to figure out what it costs to live in Ogdensburg if you own a home valued at $100,000, much less one at $200,000. What are we doing about this? Again, as I mentioned earlier, we are working hard with our collective bargaining agreements, trying to find the concessions and the common ground there to reduce the services and reduce those contracts to something that can be afforded in the next 3 to 5 years while we figure out ways to increase our revenue. Most important, what are we doing on our revenue side? For the first time in many years, we're rolling our sleeves back up and digging in hard to find ways to expand our property tax base. We have miles, literally miles, of waterfront in the city of Ogdensburg that needs to be developed. Sadly enough, a lot of it is still well contaminated. Some is pretty close to being developed, and we're hoping to have that marketing opportunity soon. We're hoping to partner with the county and the state and federal agencies to address the properties that have long sat idle, not being cleaned up or being prepared for the tax base. We know we need to do those things. This council knows we need to do those things. The reduction in sales tax distribution that was proposed early on, that would have been largely about a $1.1 million decrease to our revenue, would be devastating. Our fire department functions around a $3.5 million total operating expense. You can see what 1.1 million a year would do to that. If the total formula is realized at $11 million over 10 years, again, you can look at any department in our city and see that we would literally have to darn near close it. Those are not problems that we want to have to face right now while we're trying to revive, and I hope they're not problems you want to have to face. If we can't afford to provide police protection in the city of Ogdensburg, it largely will default to the county to provide local law enforcement. I don't think you want to see that, and neither do we. These are not idle threats, these are just me telling you the realities of what that sort of a cut in our tax revenue would do to any of our city operating departments. We largely have three places where our revenue goes. Public works, public safety, and all the other city services. If you cut all the other city services, we still largely wouldn't bring ourselves much out of the hole. It only is those two, public works and public safety. You can walk the halls with me at City Hall any day and find we've cut every administrative position, every management position. Quite frankly, we cut it to the detriment of being able to grow. I have nobody left in planning. I have nobody left in development, nobody in engineering. These are all places that I've got to restore funding, I've got to restore resources if we stand a chance at moving this agenda forward to increase revenue. What I'm ultimately here to ask you tonight is please strongly consider what I'm saying. Please strongly reach out to me, the mayor, anybody on city council, and talk to us about what we would use this additional funding in our formula we've asked for sales tax distribution. This is not money that will be squandered. It's not money that will go to waste. It's not money that we will use on nice-to-have projects. It is money that we will use to revive the city of Ogdensburg and hopefully continue to survive a city that is the only city in this county. Yes, understanding it would mean some challenges for the county, no question. It was also some challenging times when this county came and asked all the cities and towns and villages to support that additional 1 cent, to support that 8%. And you had the overwhelming support of the city of Ogdensburg. All we're asking now is for an additional small piece of that money. The money that made this county so well. This county that was in such bad financial difficulty not that many years ago, we're asking to be allowed to use some of that money to get ourselves well. And then we will certainly conform to whatever policy, whatever distribution model that this board sees fit. Or we will make the bold decision and preempt and go on our own. And maybe it's time. Maybe it's time that the city of Ogdensburg looks and says, if we're going to be a city, if we're going to survive as a standalone city, that we'd be able to rise and or fall with our own revenue. But give us this opportunity. The proposal was for the entire 10-year contract. Our mayor in the very first session relented to just give us 3 years. Give us 3 years of that additional revenue. Give us 3 years to change policies and change the way we're doing business in Ogdensburg and get ourselves moving in a different direction. If you can't live with that, make us some proposal, negotiate, work with us. Bring some plan that will help us revive the city. It is the only city in this county. It is the shining star of this county. It is largely the entire city on the St. Lawrence River waterfront. It's a city that we all want to be proud of. We all were once very proud of at one point. And I'm asking you all again to please consider things are happening differently. They're not happening so peacefully sometimes. They're not happening so smoothly at times, but things are happening. Things are changing. And I think largely the people of Ogdensburg will be pleased with the financial situation that this council will put them in just a few years. Again, I ask humbly and sincerely for your help, for your consideration to the proposal that we've made, and please work with us. Asking any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Jolly. Mr. Jolly does have to get to his Ogdensburg City Council meeting, and so if we can have some comments, anyone on the Zoom? Mr. Berg?
Well, I didn't have my hand raised, Kevin, but I'll be glad to make a comment. And that's since this new office, since the new mayor took office this year, and since you have next year, your funding is stable through 2021. I guess I'm wondering, what is your plan? What is your strategic plan to help address some of the challenges that you outlined?
You'll be able to hear me now.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Sir, thanks for the question. So our plan largely in this budget cycle is to do just what you said. It is to take the known revenues that we have and sort of the scary situation with not knowing what the state will come through with, when they'll come through with it. But our plan for this year is to be able to do just that, is to be able to stabilize our workforce, stabilize our services, establish a budget this year that we can sustain without being in the annual cut drill. In other words, just getting through this year with a plan immediately following to start planning how to cut for next year. Our plan is to make the cuts that we need to make, stabilize the programs that we need to stabilize, and then actively begin working hard to generate the additional revenue. We have also, we have researched high and low, and the data is not great on if we preempt what our sales tax would look like, but we are continuing to research, would it just be in everyone's benefit for us to preempt? Would it be better for us to be out of the overall formula and just collect the sales tax there? But our plan largely is to continue to assess, and keep in mind this council's been in office 9 months, so there's been lots of day-to-day challenges, but we are creating a strategic plan and a strategic vision for how we can increase growth largely around the waterfront in Ogdensburg.
Okay. Anyone else?
Oh, Mr. Burke, with follow-up?
Follow-up, if I could. We've had a committee chaired by Dave Forsyth that has been working with you to an attempt to reach some kind of an agreement. What's your perspective on the work thus far?
Go ahead.
My perspective, with all due respect, is that the committee is very firm on the position that we should preempt or accept the formula in which they're proposing, largely after we wait to see what our census is and use that formula. I can't say as I feel like there's been a negotiation of any sort. We've had a couple of sessions where I think we've largely aired our concerns, our circumstances, but I don't feel as though we've had a negotiation between what you all proposed early on and what we have in turn proposed. I feel like negotiation will be someplace between what you proposed and we proposed, and I don't feel like we've gotten to that level of discussion, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Burke.
One additional follow-up. I guess I'm concerned about a potential end run. I mean, you know, Joe Lightfoot appointed a committee, and Joe, I believe, was part of that committee to try to work towards a solution with you. And a substantial part of the year has already gone by. And what we know is that you have reached out to the town supervisors to garner their support for a proposal that would take a significant block of money away from the county. I guess I'm just wondering, you know, when we talk good faith negotiations, you know, how would we conclude that the negotiations thus far on the part of the city have been in good faith?
Sir, again, with all due respect, I don't think we've had negotiations. And I think at the point where the committee actually is negotiating, I think discussions with everybody, with the exception of the small group, would be appropriate. But again, Mr. Burke, I'll tell you, I don't think we've had negotiations. We've had a couple, again, sessions where I think we've aired concerns, we've aired circumstances, we've aired positions, but I can't tell you there's been one bit of discussion that I've been part of that's had anything that looked like a negotiation. And just to follow on for a second, I don't feel like we've been attempting to end run anything. I think the mayor of Ogdensburg feels like he has a duty and responsibility to not give the appearance as the only entity that is allowed to negotiate the sales tax distribution. I think he has a desire to make sure that he's not seen as doing this from a purely selfish perspective, as to have public support weigh against the city of Ogdensburg. So I think largely what we've been trying to do is garner the support that we are trying to negotiate something that's good for the city of Ogdensburg, as well as it's good for the towns and the villages. We've not had one conversation that has been anything about asking people to do anything except listen to the information and make their own decision from there. We've not been using this as a means to storm the legislature, if you will, not in any way, shape, or form. And I've been a part of all those discussions. They've been very respectful, very short, quite frankly, information sessions where we have asked the participants if they have any questions on the information we provided. So I think that's how I would characterize those. But I would say again, at the point we begin negotiating, truly negotiating some sort of a deal other than we're not doing this or we're not doing that, then I think that everybody will act a little more in common.
Mr. Arquette.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With all due respect, Mr. Jelly, to say that you feel that as though no negotiations have really had any merit, I think is an unfair statement to our negotiating team. The year extension, I believe, came out of that negotiation, and I think that was very good of the county to extend that out. I think one thing that's very important that any of the towns and villages that are listening tonight or will follow up on this is that throughout this process, one thing that was very clear with the sitting legislators at the time, and we have some new faces since this thing started, but that every town and village that we represent as legislators would not be affected in a negative way at all through this negotiation with Ogdensburg. So I just want to point that out. And as far as yourself, you have come aboard at a very difficult time for Ogdensburg. There's no doubt about it. But Ogdensburg came out of the negotiation 10 years ago and was perceived by many as a very, very good way. So Ogdensburg's went 10 years with likely a bigger share than what should have been warranted. So in essence, I'm pretty comfortable moving forward with Ogdensburg being treated as though they're a village. Much has changed since the census 10 years ago. That'll remain to be seen when the census is complete. But I think the county's made a great deal. The negotiating team under Dave has made a great deal of effort to bring you to the table, and most of the time before you got there. So that's where I'm at. Thank you.
Mr. Arquette, as the leader of the Democratic caucus, would it be fair to say that you are united in the fact that you would like this, the sharing be done as far as assessment and population, much like the towns and the villages? I mean, obviously, we Republicans are divided because we have 2 members that represent parts of the city. So we are not united, but would it be fair to say that the Democrats are united in sharing 50-50 assessment and population?
Well, I can't, at our most recent meeting, it appears as though the majority of the Democrats do support what you just said.
Okay, thank you. So I know, Mr. Jelly, if you'd like to make one final comment, you've got to hit the road, probably.
No, sir. Thank you, everybody, for your time. I really appreciate it, Chairman. Thank you for giving me the time tonight. I appreciate it.
I would like to make one final comment. I'm sorry, Mr. Smithers.
Yeah, now, I'm kind of new to this, but I'm hearing different proposals, and I just want to clarify what I thought you said earlier, that you would desire. Now, I just want to be clear about this. Did you say a 3-year extension of the current formula of distribution? Because you have a proposal from the mayor to increase that, and there was a proposal earlier to have that decreased. So you're looking for something in the middle, which would be the current formula. And did you say that you would like a 3-year extension of that?
No, sir. The proposal that you have from the mayor was our formula, if you will, for 10 years. We'd be willing to accept at this point that formula for 3 years. And again, we certainly are open to negotiation on the topic in general.
So for clarification, the 3 years would be not the old formula, it would be the mayor's new proposal.
Yes,
This was 7%. Okay, so I'll just make a comment because I know you have to run. We have a big meeting. One of the things that your mayor has done and the city has done is they've made the assertion that because of this extra 1%, that the largesse of the sales tax is what is contributed to the fund balance or made the fund balance for this county. And I think it's actually an insult to the people that work for us. We've gone from 1,100 employees down to 800 employees, and they're basically doing the same job that the 1,100 were doing. A tremendous sacrifice on their part. And the increase in sales tax has benefited all the towns and municipalities also. And the reality is, with the additional 1%, you continue to share 6.43%. So in the last year, that meant $937,000 for you, while the rest of the municipalities share 1.4 million, and the county gets the bulk of it. So it's really not a fair assertion. So I just wanted to get that out there. I don't think there's any board member here that would be inclined to go along with the mayor's 7%, but we're not in negotiations right here today. But I want to thank you for coming, and we appreciate it. I do know you do have some items that you'd like to talk about the county sharing. If you could put that in some type of format and what those positions are so that our administration could react to those and see what is actually possible. Mr. Forsythe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Steve, I just want to thank you for coming. At the last negotiation, and I have to agree with it, it isn't a negotiation. This is, we're telling the city, this is the way it is, either you preempt or you take what we give you. And to me, that's not a negotiation. And I'll stand behind you. I want to thank you for your passion. I know what you're up against. No one would wish this on anyone. And I, for one, don't want to see the city fail. My business is in the city. I graduated from the city. My heart's in the city. And I don't think this board wants to see it fail. Is there a solution? I think there is. At this point in time, I'm willing to give you a chance. To cut them by $1 million, you're going to sink the city of Ogdensburg. You will sink them. If the preemption takes place, the conversations have started already in Messina. They want it based on population instead of population and assessed values. The conversations will start. The small little towns are going to be left somewhere down the road on their own. I'm not making a threat. I'm just telling you the way I feel it's going to happen. I hope we can come to some sort of compromise. I'm willing to give a bigger extension. I would propose giving you 4 years and leaving it the same. Give you time to sort out whatever you need to sort out. And then we can make our decision after that. If anyone wanted to support that resolution, I would propose it.
But I hate to deal with hypotheticals. We will have the census numbers. And then I think this board, by looking at the real numbers and seeing what changes that the city would experience, that I think that you have fair people here that represent all this community, and no one wants to see the city go down either. But I think if we had those numbers and realized the action that we wanted to take and how it would affect the city, then I think we could adjust our position. Mr. Reagan.
You know, I think it's appropriate that we're having this discussion shortly before Halloween, because this is really an opportunity to unmask those who are proposing to defund the Ogdensburg Police Department and defund the Ogdensburg Fire Department. As Dave has said, and Dave's the chair of the committee that's been negotiating with the city of Ogdensburg, there have been no negotiations. The meetings have been, the county has said, we're going to take your money. And the city has said, don't take our money. And the city county has said, well, we're going to take your money, so you might as well preempt. Now, there's people who have suggested that I have made this false narrative that, and I think everyone should understand what they've been talking about. If the city of Ogdensburg preempts, then the towns and villages will no longer have the protection of the existing contract. Now, while there will be those who will disagree with me, I was at the meetings with the Conference of Mayors where they asked the city of Ogdensburg to stand firm and protect them and keep the current system the way it is. And the county said, well, if you keep doing that, that we're gonna move to take $1.9 million from the city. And when the city said, well, let's negotiate this, let's talk about sharing services, the county said, well, you can pay us for that, plus we're gonna take your money. Currently, under state law, the city of Ogdensburg is required to reimburse the county for its, for unpaid property taxes. When someone doesn't pay their property taxes, the city of Ogdensburg has to reimburse the city school district. When someone doesn't pay their property taxes, the city has to reimburse the county. Now, no town and no village is treated that way. Every town in the county and village has been relieved of responsibility of repairing bridges over the length of 25 feet. The city of Ogdensburg has Lafayette Spring Street Bridge, one of the largest bridges in the county, and that's their responsibility. The city of Ogdensburg has a long history of working with all the communities in this county and providing shared services and assisting them when they've needed help. Now, at a time when the city of Ogdensburg is dealing with what can only be described as a fiscal crisis, there are individuals in this room who are proposing to take the money from that funds the police department and the fire department and have said, I won't spend a nickel so Ogdensburg can have a police department. Ladies and gentlemen, I find that unacceptable, and I think it's important that we as a county stand up, protect our towns and villages, because it's already been starting to be proposed. The mayor of Messina has proposed, let's change the formula. Let's distribute money based on population. What's that gonna do to Clare? What's that gonna do to DePoyster? What's that gonna do to the small towns that don't have a lot of population? The day will come when 8 people get together and decide to distribute the sales tax in another method. Now, everyone can find something wrong with the current system. Some communities have high levels of tax exempt property. Some towns don't. Each of them can claim the current system penalizes them, and they are correct. The system as it stands is unfair. It's unfair to everybody. But let's make no mistake about it. It is the system that has worked, and it's a system that can continue to work if we extend it and do what the 32 towns and the 12 villages and the city have asked us to do for the past 2 years, and that is keep the system the way it is. Because once we start tinkering with it, once we let Pandora out of the box, the result will be unfavorable to many of the communities in this county. It may not happen right away, but you're creating the conditions for a disaster. First with the city of Ogdensburg, and then for the rest of the county. Because once the towns and villages have no protection, the day will come when this board says, we need some more money, let's take it from them. So, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Forsythe's absolutely correct. We need to extend the current system in order to protect all of our communities and make sure that all of our communities can succeed and move forward. Thank you.
Mr. Fay, you're part of the sales tax committee. Have you ever heard anybody on the sales tax committee propose defunding the police or defunding the fire department of the Ogdensburg city?
No, I haven't.
Thank you very much. Let's, I'd like to close this up. I know you guys are running. There is one more question. We have time? Do you have time? It's okay with me. Mr. Smither, oh, I'm sorry. Let, Ms. Kern, she has not asked a question.
I wanted to clarify something. I didn't think that we collected unpaid property tax from you. I thought that if there was unpaid property tax due to us, I thought we just kind of hung out with that. Am I wrong?
We pay you what we collect, and I believe we have a long-standing balance owed to you for the tax currently, yes, ma'am.
Okay. And I kind of feel like Jim and Dave, I think that you inherited quite a bit of mischief and a poorly balanced budget from the people before you, and a lot of things that you need to contend with. I would be amenable to some sort of extension at the current system. I don't think we have extra money to give to anybody. But I understand where you're coming from, and I think that this city fiscal issue is kind of like we're all in this together, like we're all in the opioid crisis together, and I kind of have a mess in Messina right now with what's going on and so forth, but I'd be happy to talk about it.
Mr. Smithers.
Legislative foresight, I was just gonna say that I support it.
Thank you.
Mr. Arquette.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As we appear to be a David versus Goliath type of situation here, I think it's very important that that folks in the communities realize that the counties, when Mr. Jelly talks about we and they, and I think it's very important that everybody realizes that the 20+ departments that we oversee in the county provide services to all of the very same people that you're talking about, that you and the leadership in Ogdensburg represent, and all the other towns and villages across this county. That the magnitude of what the county provides for all of those very same citizens is humongous, and I think that needs to be said.
Thank you. Mrs. Haggart, you're nodding your head. Do you want to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, I'm listening and I agree with what Tony said. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else on Zoom? If I missed your hand or anything? Okay. Mr. Berg.
I think it's important to know that what many of us struggle with is asking 100,000 of our population to give a disproportionate share to 10 or 11,000. And it's a real struggle, and it's not that we don't understand the dilemma that's Ogdensburg is in, but again, this isn't our money. This belongs to the taxpayers of St. Lawrence County, and it's really it's a dilemma, and nobody wants to be mean-spirited, and certainly we have the utmost respect for your fire and police department. But on the other hand, it boils down to the question, can we ask all of our constituents, the 100,000 people, to continue to subsidize the city of Ogdensburg disproportionately? Don't have an easy answer for it, but it's certainly a dilemma for us.
Thank you, Mr. Berg. Mr. Jelly, you want a final response? We'll wrap this up.
Mr. Chairman, and again, all the legislators, I appreciate your time. I just would ask you again, as Mr. Burke just said, I'll just throw my spin to that, is can the county afford to have Ogdensburg fail? That really is the question that you have to answer at the end of this discussion, at the end of the negotiation. Can you afford to have us fail? If the city wraps up and fails, can the county afford to take over all the record services that are provided by the city? Or is it better to work with us now to prop the city back up and keep those services moving forward? Thank you for your time.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Jelly.
Thank you.
It's a great discussion. Okay, let's move on. We have a resolution for highway. That resolution. Oh, I'm sorry. I almost, it's okay. I was jumping ahead. We have a broadband. We moved you guys to the back. Okay, so we have a broadband survey assessment, and I'd like to introduce you, Carl Brown. He is the new executive director for the Development Authority of the North Country. We have also Lori Marr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate everyone's time tonight. I will keep it brief. and I'm certainly this will be a little lighter than the previous conversation. My name's Carl Fernone. I am the Executive Director of the Development Authority. Have big shoes to fill following Jim Wright, but I will do my best. And I'm here to talk about broadband. As most of you probably know, the Development Authority, we own and operate a telecommunications system throughout Jefferson, Lewis, St. Lawrence County, connectivity to Syracuse, Plattsburgh, New York City. As a result of COVID, I think we all are beginning to realize the true importance of telecommunications capability. The Development Authority, we have spent quite a bit of money. The state of New York has spent a large amount of money in trying to invest in broadband, but we're still not where we need to be. With the pandemic, things have changed where even individuals who had access at their home that was satisfactory, now you have my own household, my daughter's at JCC, telecommuting, myself, I might be on a Zoom meeting, a board meeting, my wife doing the same. So the broadband needs have increased through this COVID. And I believe that it's gonna be a while until we're through it. And I also think that there's an opportunity as a North Country region, Jefferson, Lewis, St. Lawrence County. There are many folks that live in New York City, New Jersey, these urban areas that they don't necessarily have to live in New York City to do their jobs. I actually have friends who actually telecommute to New York City. So I think we have an opportunity, if we have the broadband infrastructure in place, to actually lure some of these folks to St. Lawrence County to live. They could work in New York City and live in St. Lawrence County. So it could be a win-win. The bottom line is broadband, it's not a luxury. It's just like National Grid, it's like power, it's like telephone, you have to have it. And one of the things that we have struggled with at the Development Authority is when COVID hit, there were a number of students that didn't have connectivity. There are folks that are working from home that didn't have connectivity. We really today do not have a great idea of specific areas that are documented that are unserved or underserved. So one of the things that the Development Authority has done is ECC Technologies is a company that actually helped us create our telecommunications network back in 2004. And ECC Technologies actually has a two-pronged approach as far as trying to document areas in St. Lawrence County that are underserved or unserved. The first step, pretty basic. Basically, they put a couple of staff folks in a truck and they drive every road throughout St. Lawrence County. And they look at the telephone poles and they document, is there coax, is there fiber? And when they're doing this, they're looking at cell towers, they're talking to people, they're researching underground fiber. So they're doing all this legwork to document the physical infrastructure that's in place. Now, could the authority and our staff do this? Yes, we could. We just don't have the manpower to get it done quick. So ECC could do this for us. So that's phase one. In all of this, the beauty, they'll actually put into a GIS database that is mapped, and we will actually be able to look at St. Lawrence County and see which areas have no connectivity, which areas are, we'll talk about being underserved. And then the second part of this, it's actually a survey, and this is where we'll need your help, St. Lawrence County, in that it's an online survey that ECC has developed, and ECC has done this in other areas. We've actually launched this in Lewis County as we speak. They're actually riding the roads today. They'll be finished, I believe, this week as far as the physical inventory. And then as far as the survey piece, it's an online survey that can ask whatever questions we want. And we would work with folks at St. Lawrence County devising the questions that we would want to ask the residents. It's things like, do you have internet access? If you do, do you deem it too expensive? Is it fast enough? What's more important, price or the bandwidth? Asking those types of questions to determine what the actual needs are of the residents. And this is for businesses as well as the residents. But the key is and Lori Myers, our Director of Communication, is we have to get the word out. The Development Authority will invest in marketing it, putting out advertisements, but it's word of mouth. It's you folks talking with your constituents and saying, you need to do this survey, get it done, it's important. And then at the end of the day, basically the physical infrastructure is in the GIS database, and it's overlaid with this survey information. So you actually have a GIS map that shows all the areas, unserved, underserved, and then the results of all those surveys. And then at the end of the day, what we can do is we can take this information, and it's twofold from my perspective. One, it's going to tell the Development Authority of the North Country if we have limited resources, where we can invest and where we can reach the greatest population and provide them with access that they need. And then the second piece is actually for federal grants. There are going to be, we hope, grant monies through the federal government to support building out fiber and infrastructure in rural areas. So what this will do is it would position St. Lawrence County, the Development Authority would work with you to apply for a grant so that we could build out areas, unserved areas within St. Lawrence County. Now, the Development Authority, our board of directors have authorized the Development Authority to fund 50% of the cost. And the cost is $76,500. St. Lawrence County half would be $38,250. So what I'm asking today is your consideration to consider funding this project as a partner with the Development Authority. It's $38,250. Basically, the Development Authority can act as the lead if you so choose, because we're the telecom folks. We worked with Lewis and they were happy with that. We're more than happy to work with you folks in St. Lawrence County. You can take it as big a role or as small a role as you want. But we would like, from a public outreach, if you chose to go in this direction, to help us with the survey. And I think right now we have Lewis County is on board. Jefferson County is going to look at it November 10th, and then St. Lawrence County. So it'd be great to do the whole North Country.
Certainly.
Any questions?
Well, let's ask the board for feedback. Mr. Denisha.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Pearl, thank you much for coming this evening. I think it's great, but I think back to it was March 1 of 2016, and the governor was here, Potsdam State, and announced that the launch of the new New York broadband program. And I've got in front of me, the program will provide high-speed internet access for all New Yorkers by the end of 2018.
Yes.
We've got, and I'll speak about my district. I've got a largely rural district. We have many homes that do not have access to broadband. And as you can imagine, with distance learning, it makes it almost impossible.
Yes.
So, I can support a survey, but, if all we're gonna get is numbers again and no action, we're gonna be right back where we are today.
Yes, I appreciate the question, and I can assure you that the reason why that we are developed, why the authority is spending this money, is the authority. I can't stand here today and promise you that every resident in St. Lawrence County would have fiber to the home. But what I can promise is we will take this data, we will work with you folks and determine, with our resources, where we can build out and how we can best utilize our resources for the best of Jefferson, Lewis, and St. Lawrence counties. We're not doing this study to let it sit on a shelf. We're actually doing the study because our board at the authority wants to actually be proactive. We want to help students who need to distance learn and people that are actually working from.
Is this survey being done to get the grant, or are we looking for grant money or what? I was told at one point in time that 1 out of 15 students in St. Lawrence County does not have broadband. Did that number come out of the sky? you don't know that, or are you going to do a survey all over to find out that number?
So as far as this survey would help us in determining which areas don't have access. And it's dependent on the individuals who actually complete the survey as far as what the results would be. As far as the survey you're referring to, I'm not 100, I haven't seen that survey, but this would actually document in St. Lawrence County what areas don't have access, and would actually be able to look at the residents, the number of homes, and be able to invest funds appropriately. But it would position us to actually apply for grant monies.
So you're asking basically the survey being done to get grant money to pay for this?
It would be, no, as far as this cost here would be split 50-50 between St. Lawrence County and the Development Authority. So that wouldn't be funded by grant money. Was that the question as far as the cost of the survey itself? Yeah, so St. Lawrence County would be paying $38,000 and the Development Authority would be paying the other half. And then that would give us the detail to be able to apply for grants in the future.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Reagan.
I've had the privilege of working with the Development Authority for many years, and they're an outstanding group that does terrific work for the people of the 3 counties. If I'm correct in understanding, what you're saying is with this money, we can speed up getting better services to a lot of areas that otherwise will continue to be left behind. Is that a fair characterization?
That is. It will provide the documentation for the Development Authority with our own money to see which areas need infrastructure the most. So it'll allow us to prioritize where we're going to invest. And then secondly, so that will happen regardless of other grant money. And then secondly, it will position us so that we can apply for federal grant money if it's available.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Mrs. Hybrid?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's not so much a question, but an observation. I know, having taught in a school district that Mr. Akers and Ms. Curran both represent, that this was a problem before COVID, and it was a serious problem because kids are required to do online classes, and I taught special education. Unfortunately, it seemed like a disproportionate number of those students didn't have access to broadband, and they were at a disadvantage because of that. Now, I retired before COVID came along, but I don't think it's going to change. In fact, I anticipate from what I've read and talking to former colleagues that we're going to continue to have this requirement. We now see what we can do with online teaching, and we all know I don't want to say we all know, but it's my opinion there's a lot of kids that need not to be online. They need to be in the school. But if this survey were going to help those kids, I'd be all for it. So that's just my take on the situation. It's not anything that just popped up all of a sudden because of COVID. It's been a problem, particularly, and I know Mr. Akers, you probably could agree with me, in the area where I taught before retiring. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mrs. Haggard. Mr. Minelli?
Thank you, and thank you very much for your information this evening. I know to provide the broadband infrastructure for economic development is key. It's one of the things that discourages businesses from being able to come to the North Country oftentimes. And also as an educator, I definitely know the importance of everybody having access to broadband. I guess my question is, how would the information that you would be able to compile be different than what, for example, I know school districts were tasked with the job of figuring out who had access to broadband. So all school districts right now could actually provide that information of who has accessibility. Do they have enough to support multiple devices running at one time right now? And with all the school districts being able to encompass basically from border to border across the county as far as addresses go, how would the information that you could compile through this voluntary survey be different than what they already have access to?
Well, I think that from our perspective, it's twofold. One, we'll actually have the hard data as far as what is it physically on the pole line. So what infrastructure is actually in place. One of the things that our director of telecommunication did look at for us, he looked at, I haven't actually seen the survey information, but he was talking about the survey, and we actually did some QC work. And some of the folks that actually said that they did not have access, actually did have access, but the parents just didn't choose to actually pay for the access. So our survey would drill down a little bit further and ask more specific questions. Actually, when you go into the actual survey, there's a speed test as soon as you go in. You have to actually include your address. There's more information that is gathered, but there's also the physical infrastructure. So we will actually know throughout all of St. Lawrence County what infrastructure is actually in place, whether or not there's a fiber optic cable that runs in front of someone's home, as an example. So that is something that, to date, the authority, we are not aware that that exists. It's something that I believe is critical to have so that we know. And one of the missing links that I've spoken with Ruth about is we don't know the plans of a spectrum, what their fiber build-outs would be. They won't share that with the development authority, but it's our understanding at the county level that they would share that with you. You have to actually sign a non-disclosure, but that would be part of this package as well, is to understand the incumbents. What are their plans? What do you plan on doing? Because the development authority, we don't want to invest where in 2 months spectrum might overbuild. So it really is a team effort to try to put all these pieces together.
Thank you. Mr. Smithers.
I would agree with some of the other comments made. Part of my district is in the town of Deep Oyster, which isn't very heavily populated. It's kind of remote. And it's with the COVID that we have now, I don't think this is going away anytime soon for sure, and it is better for the children to be in school. But this access to the internet is, I think, becoming, if it hasn't already become, a necessity for children to have this especially. And if they don't, I think we could almost categorize them as disadvantaged right now with the remote learning that's being required of them. So I think part of the government's responsibility is to try to ensure people have equal opportunities. So however we can ensure that every home does have access to this is important.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, seeing none, I think it's a great idea, especially we know mental health issues that on their own department, they're getting more visits. People instead of driving here, they're doing more over the phone. Also, a big change is telemedicine. So those two things. So with the board's approval, I'd like to bring forth a resolution for the board meeting that would put in for this $38,250. Unless anyone objects, Mrs. Kern, you have an objection?
No objection, I think it's a good idea.
So we can do that. Thank you very much, Mr. Frone.
Thank you, everyone.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, go ahead.
I had a question for him.
Okay, I'm sorry, Rick. Yep.
Now, I'm in a rural district where there's many that don't have basic cable internet. Some don't even have phone. We had somebody come before us before, I think it was Time Warner Cable at the time, but now Spectrum, even Slick. You have different areas that you control that you're supposed to put so much broadband or cable internet infrastructure in, and many times they don't follow the
the goals that they're supposed to, and they pay the fine because it's cheaper than putting the infrastructure up. Can you explain any of that to me?
And to be perfectly honest, I cannot explain as far as paying the fine being less expensive. I do know that many of the incumbents are required to actually install a certain number of lines, and that they have been falling short on that. But that is not something that currently I'm apprised to. Dave Wolf, our Director of Telecommunications, would be, but I apologize, I am not.
But they have all that information of who has broadband and where lines go. Are you privy to that information?
We are not, no.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
It's probably proprietary.
Yeah, so as far as when we first created the network, I remember sitting down with Verizon, and they will not share 1 fiber mile where it's located, and they do not have to share it with us. And it is a very interesting dynamic how they wouldn't want to share the information so that we could build a more robust infrastructure to benefit everyone. But they will not share that the detail of what they own.
Okay, so thank you, Mr. Ferrone, for your time and your presentation. Lori, do you want equal time or you're heading out?
No, there's just one comment that I would make.
Come up to the mic, please.
I think it's important to note that the gentleman over here talked about, he heard about a survey or a statistic, 1 in 15 students didn't have access. I mean, I've heard all sorts of numbers. 40% of each school district didn't have access. So there's a lot of numbers flying around, but most of them seem to be pretty anecdotal. And this project here will provide us with cold, hard data that makes it much easier to fill in those grant applications rather than just, this person said this and I heard this and this organization said this. So I just think it's important to note that, because I've heard a lot of different statistics. I hadn't heard the one that you mentioned, but there's a lot of information being tossed around out there, but this is going to provide cold, hard, irrefutable facts. Thank you.
Thanks, Lori. Okay. So thanks once again, Mr. Ferrone. So our first resolution for this evening is for highway, and it's authorizing the chair to award and sign contracts for Browns Bridge Road over the Racket River in the town of Pierpont. Bid number 322-1560, PIN number 775380. Moved by Ms. Curran, seconded by Mr. Forsythe. Discussion. Mr. Chambers.
Yes, thank you. This is a Bridge New York project that is in the proposed 2021 budget. It is funded with 95% federal funds through the Federal Highway Transportation and 5% by the county. This project did come in within budget and will be, the plan is to construct this in 2021. Awarding the project at this point in time allows the contractor to procure the materials to be successful next season, such as the structural steel and bearings.
Okay. Questions for Mr. Chambers, Mr. Forsythe?
Yeah, so Don, the county cost is right around $100,000 on this project?
That's correct. For the construction portion, yes.
For the bridge in Pierpont. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Successful next season.
Okay, anyone else? We're getting a repeat, you're getting an echo up here, Mr. Chambers. Mr. Perkins?
I'll be abstaining due to my employment.
Okay. Mr. Burke?
I fully support this. I just have a question for Don before he leaves about highway. But again, I wholeheartedly support this.
So, Mr. Chambers, will you be around for old and new business? We could entertain Mr. Burke's comments then, or questions?
Of course.
Okay, can we do that then, Mr. Burke?
That's fine.
Okay, thank you, John. Right, so any more discussion on the resolution? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Mr. Chambers.
Thank you.
Next up, our resolution from the county attorney, Mr. Stephen Button, is authorizing the chair to sign a contract with Gary Bowich, Esquire, for legal services related to environmental matters. Moved by Mr. Forsyth, second by Mr. Denisha, Ms. Curran, and Mr. Lightfoot. Mr. Button.
I hope you all can hear me from where I'm seated.
Kelly, yes.
Thank you. If you can't hear me, please feel free to let me know. I think everyone is familiar with Mr. Bowich. Mr. Bowich has worked with the county now for quite some time. He first came on with the county dealing with the J&L site. After the J&L site, he's been instrumental in negotiating many of the agreements that we have had with the DEC and with the oil spill fund and with the EPA as we have worked through over the course of the past 5 years, more than 50 properties. Mr. Bowich has never had a formalized relationship with the county, and he is reaching the end of what he has described as his practice area with the firm of Bowich and Coffey. But in talking to Gary, Gary has indicated that with a signed contract that we would essentially lock in his services definitively for the next 3 years with the option to renew for 2 successive 1-year periods. The amount of this contract right now would amount to essentially around $38,000 for year 1. There would be increases for years 2, years 3, and potentially years 4 and 5. But to give you a sense of what we've been spending on Gary's services already, we did take a look at a 5-year average. Last year, we spent approximately $32,000 on Gary's services. The year prior, we spent about $30,000 on Gary's services. So he's actually been running around $31,000 per year for his services, and that was not unlimited. This contract will make our activities unlimited with respect to environmental engagement and environmental law.
Any questions for Mr. Button concerning this resolution? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Thank you, Mr. Button. Next up is our Vacancy Review Committee, and it's Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. Ms. Doyle, I'd like to speak to this.
Yes, Barb is joining us this evening to speak to this. I just wanted to mention briefly to you that in the vacancy review, as you've all been agreeable this last year, for us to move so that one resolution comes before you at the board meeting after each department presents. What we'd like to do, if it's okay, is at these times, rather than have that resolution, just take a motion from the floor to send it forward. So then there's a vote taken at the meeting of committee, typical for what we do with any motion, just like the motion Mr. Akers made a little bit earlier for the funds for day. So if there's no objection to that, we'll have Barb present, and then anyone from the floor can make a motion, and that will help us forward that on to the board meeting. Barb?
Hi, everybody. So my request basically is that we fill an employment and training counselor position. We had a retirement on September 18th, 2020. That position is already accounted for in our current budget. We actually budgeted it as a grade 24 step 10 to allow for a safety net. If we hire at a lesser rate, then the extra funds would go toward training.
Okay, any questions for Ms. Lajoie? Okay, all those in favor of moving forward with this, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening, everybody.
Thank you, Barb.
You too. Okay, next up is a resolution opposing the unfunded mandate of enforcement of the executive orders related to the COVID-19 pandemic and calling upon the governor of the state of New York to remove the threat of loss of state aid conditioned on enforcement. Moved by Mr. Forsyth, second by Mr. Sheridan and Mr. Lightfoot and Ms. Curran. Any discussion? Mr. Burke.
Excuse me, I won't be supporting this. I know that there are mandates that have been issued, and I guess my question would be, where have we been tagged with fines or any kind of retribution as a result of what the governor has done. And again, and certainly not everything is perfect. There are inconsistencies, and I can't imagine the magnitude of the job that New York State Health Department has had in trying to contain COVID. And as I listen to the national news and look at the incidents, the outbreaks in many of the states, I have to tell you, I'm delighted to live in New York State for a number of reasons, but in particular right now for the COVID. So, I mean, I certainly don't want to be giving any messages back to the governor that would indicate that I'm not happy with the overall job that he's done. Again, there are inconsistencies. There are things that we might like to change, but I'm not about to vote for this.
Anyone else? Okay. So I think the problem I had was with the deputizing, where basically anybody gets a paper badge and could rat on their neighbor or whatever. I know, John, Mr. Burke, you said that you were happy with New York's performance. New York leads the America in the number of COVID deaths. We have over 1,700 per million. The nursing home deaths are off the charts. In relationship to the other states, we are not the shining example. So that's why I think the infringement of our constitutional rights, people being responsible for themselves. I mean, I object to the 1-800 number. I think that people can be responsible for their own selves. I see people, particularly up here in St. Lawrence County, they're wearing their masks, they're maintaining the social distancing. I just think that this is a real infringement of our constitutional rights. The executive orders have gone so far that I'd like to see them terminated. So, Mr. Smithers.
Yeah, I agree that it's important to have reasonable protections and utilize safety precautions, and I support some of what the governor has done, but I don't want to get to the point where we have people ratting on their neighbors, calling the 800 number. It's too much like the 1984 and what happened in Nazi Germany, and I think you can just go too far with this. And a lot of people that I've talked with do object to this over enforcement of this. We need to utilize personal responsibilities, like you said, have people take responsibility for their actions, make their personal decisions, and protect the freedoms that we have.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to, Ms. Curran.
I agree. I don't think getting people to rat each other out when we're all in this together is helpful. If I was gonna get anybody to rat on anybody, I'd like to know where the drug dealers live, their address, and what they're up to first before I'm gonna care about whether or not you have the mask on when you go out to get your mail. And if you ever read the book, The Nightingale, it really covers very well a scenario just like this where they went through and did fines, and then you had to give the names of where the Jews were in Vichy, France, and it's too close.
Okay, for this resolution, I'd like to do a roll call. Ms. Kelly?
Sheridan?
Yes.
Smithers?
Yes.
Denisha?
Yes.
Perkins?
Yes.
Yes.
Bay?
Yes.
Haggard?
No.
Iacco?
No.
Burke?
No.
Arquette?
No.
Riley?
No.
Curran? Yes. Reagan?
Yes.
Forsythe?
Yes.
Lightfoot?
Yes.
10 yes, 5 no.
Okay, resolution passes. Our next resolution, I've deferred to Mr. Smithers.
Yes, I'd like to introduce a resolution supporting Senate Bill S 2047 and Assembly Bill A 6461, proposing amendments to Section 4 and Section 5A of Article 3 of the Constitution in relation to the number of senators and the apportionment of Senate districts.
You move that resolution, Mr. Smithers?
Yes.
Is it a second? Second by Mr. Denisha, Ms. Curran, Mr. Forsyth, Mr. Sheridan. Discussion. Mr. Smithers.
I'm in favor of this because ever since I lived up in northern New York, we have many advantages, but one thing people don't like about northern New York is that we're overpowered in legislation by people from metropolitan areas downstate, particularly New York City. And I don't look at this as Democrats versus Republicans, but more upstate versus downstate, regardless of your political affiliation. And this would give us more equitable representation in Albany, which is modeled after the federal government, where they have the Senate based on geography and the House based on population, which there's a reason they put that in forming our federal government in the beginning. And I think it only makes perfect sense for New York State to do the same.
Thank you, Mr. Smithers. Anyone else? John, Mr. Burke, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I did. Mr. Smithers, you might be 100% right, and I don't fully know the impact for St. Lawrence County, but currently we have 3 representatives, 3 senatorial representatives, and I guess I wonder, and we enjoy the work that each one of them do on behalf of St. Lawrence County. And as I looked at the resolution, I started looking around at some of the other counties, counties with less than half of our population, that in effect, we would be advocating for equal representation from those counties as well as St. Lawrence. Now, maybe overall it would not have a great impact, but I guess before I asked for a solution, I'd like to know that that solution would truly benefit St. Lawrence County.
Mr. Arquette.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Burke echoed my sentiments.
Anyone else? Mr. Sheridan.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I served on this legislative body
Mike,
since,
Mr. Sheridan, please.
I've been serving on this legislative body for 10 years now, dating back to 1980. And the one major obstacle that stands in front of us, seems like every time we meet in this room, every time we meet in these chambers, is the feeling that our voices are not being heard and they're not being read. Resolutions we send down are not being read. At least they're not being read by the people the folks who are in control, whose interest lies heavily with that of downstate New York and the New York City community. So most of our resolutions deal with the North Country's objection to their spending habits and their ongoing restrictions and unfunded mandates, and resolutions that we just addressed in the last 5 minutes before this one, that same sort of thing that we are opposed to. And so I know that our state representatives who represent us, I know that they get it. I know that they hear our voices loud and clear. And so I agree that we need a more equal distribution of legislative representation in Albany. So I will be supporting these 2 bills, proposing that the amendments to Article 3 relative to the number of senators and apportionment of the Senate district. And I applaud you and Mr. Smithers for bringing this resolution in front of us here tonight, and I'm going to support it.
Thank you, Mr. Sheridan. Anyone else? Okay, let's do a roll. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Mr. Burke.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I'm having trouble seeing where we're going to get more representation. Maybe somebody could explain it. Does downstate lose a representative? How are we gaining?
So I believe, if I'm correct, that the senators are established by population. Mr. Reagan, do you know the number of the population that a senator represents? Is it 120,000 or something of that nature?
No, it's more like 300,
300?
350,000.
I thought that was the
It's
case.
based on population and the, so you have, this would create more senators to include smaller areas. I think counties like Hamilton that have, population of 5,000 would then have a vote, Franklin, versus the current system.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Smithers, Mr. Perkins, were you finished?
Well, I guess I'm just curious. I'd like to know, what the, well, I call downstate, but the cities area, how many would they actually lose that we would gain out of this? Does anybody have that, or any kind of map to show that? I guess I'd like to know where we're gaining. It goes by population, but now we're going by county. I guess I'd like to know what the disbursement is.
So it would be, the example that I can give you, it would be like the state of Montana that has 2 senators that has equal representation of the state. And I think Montana has a population of maybe 400,000 and versus California, which has also 2 state senators. But and much like the assembly, as in on the national and federal level, the House, where I'm thinking that California has 40 some seats, maybe more or less, and where Montana has, I think, 1 congressperson. So certainly it would take power away from the metropolitan areas for sure.
I guess that's what I'm wondering, like with down in the city, the boroughs or the 10 counties or whatever, they have more population, but how many senators do they have right now versus what they would have? I mean, would it end up with 10 senators versus what they have now, which I'm not sure what they have, if it's 14 or what with a higher population. I guess I'd just like to know those numbers.
Mr. Reagan may be able to answer that.
I don't have those numbers, but there are 62 counties in New York State. New York City is made up of 5 counties. Under this proposal, New York City would have 5 senators, and the other 30 odd would be from the upstate and the 2 Long Island counties. So instead of the current distribution, the Long Island and the counties outside of New York City would share 30 senators, while New York City would have 5.
Okay. Ms. Terminelli.
I guess I'm just confused by the language in the resolution, because right now St. Lawrence County is represented by 3 senators, correct? So we get 3 votes on the table. Is that correct right now?
In theory, yes.
Okay, and so we're talking about each county then electing 1 senator so that the North Country gets more say. But in essence, what we consider the North Country is only 8 counties, whereas that mid to downstate region makes up the other, well, the rest of them, right? The other 54 counties. New York City would still get 5, the 5 boroughs of New York City would still get 5 votes, which is still about, it would just give the North Country just a little bit more leverage. I just am not sure how it's going to give us more voice in the North Country than having the 3 senators that we currently have.
So what you would have in the inter-county, Ms. Curran, you could answer that. How many counties are there?
62.
No, counties in the inter-county thing that you're a member of. Have you met? It's Clinton, Franklin, Essex, Lewis, and also Jefferson. Certainly those counties that represent the North Country would have similar issues that they would have affinity towards, which are now being blocked by the New York City I don't know how to describe it, monopoly, basically.
If you look at the Senate map, it's pretty clear that probably, it looks like about 60% of the Senate votes are Rockland and down, based on population. Most of, when you look at an election map, a good portion of New York State is red by vote, with the exception of Erie County and the 5 boroughs, they're blue. On some of these votes, if we had those 5 votes in Erie County, that'd be 6 that went one way, and the other counties went the other 56, we'd have a say for a change. And yes, we technically have 3 votes, but there's a small piece of like Messina over to Franklin County line and a little bit of towards St. Lawrence or towards Lawrence that Joe Griffo has, and then we have Louisville up this way that Patty has, and a little bit that Dan Steck has. But those 3 votes those counties would each have a vote anyways. Franklin would have a vote, Essex would have a vote. So our area would probably have a little bit more representation, even though our personal county would have 1 vote. Our neighbors who may or may not be with us on stuff would have their own votes. It'd be distributed more evenly.
Mr. Benelli.
Sorry, did I hear the referencing to votes being red or blue? Was that, so is this not about representation, but about red and blue? Because I think that's.
No, it's just when you look at a map, and
okay,
counties. If you, what I'm saying is there's times when upstate north of Albany has a very different view on things than the 5 boroughs does. Sometimes things are viewed very different, Rockland County up, when you just look at how people vote. But there's not enough votes there to make us have an even say in much of the things. It's not the first time we've heard it.
Okay, are there any other questions? Let's do, Mr. Perkins.
Yep, well, I'm just getting some information here. I'm looking, it looks like there's 37 senators in New York City, Long Island. So it does look like this would benefit us, if this is correct.
Yes,
I just wanted to throw that out there.
Mr. Sheridan.
For what it's worth, it certainly should be considered that it would benefit us, considering it's our North Country senator that's sponsoring it, Mr. Griffo, and our assemblyman, Mr. Walsnick, is sponsoring it. Those people are the sponsors of the bills, the matching bills, so they certainly wouldn't be sponsoring legislation that was not going to be to the benefit of the North Country people.
Right.
Mr. Smithers.
I would just like to point out that I don't think it's really a fair thing to say that we have 3 representatives in the Senate from St. Lawrence County, because we share those with other, as you pointed out, with other counties. So it ends up disturbing that appearance, and perhaps I should say that it's maybe not upstate versus downstate, but more rural, because there's a lot of rural counties in the western part of New York State also that would benefit from this, because being rural and not having a large population, we are overpowered by those many senators from Long Island and New York City and just north of New York City.
Yeah, thank you. So, Mrs. Kelly, we have a roll call vote, please.
I have a question before you do that, Kevin.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Burke, go ahead.
Just the process for this to be enacted. It appears, since we're appealing to both a Senate bill and an Assembly bill, that it would have to be approved by both. Is that correct?
Yes.
And the likelihood of that happening, given the current makeup of both, is 0 to none.
We did land on the moon.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is, how would we view this? How would we view this other than a political statement? Again, I'm very uncomfortable with any of these resolutions that have no chance of passing and that we're making a political statement. I feel we've got plenty of issues to deal with that we can control and should control. And the idea that we would continue to do this is troubling to me.
Thank you, Mr. Burke. I don't believe this is a red or blue issue. It's about representation of the North Country. And I think that as here in this boardroom, there's plenty of issues that we agree on 15-0. Certainly there's a lot of 8-7, 9-5s, or whatever. Mr. Arquette.
I disagree strongly with you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's 100% political in light of the fact that we're 1 week away from an election. So I'm with Mr. Burke. I will not support this. It's political grandstanding, and it's sad with all of the major issues that we do have to and should be dealing with instead of this.
Mr. Manila.
Sorry, one final word. I hate to belabor things, but if it is indeed a nonpartisan, then I think it'd be very encouraging to have co-sponsored bills by Democratic representatives as well, especially if we're really, really trying to ensure that our North Country voice is heard at the table.
Are you asking to be a co-sponsor?
No, I was actually referencing that the Senate and Assembly bills be co-sponsored by a Democrat. If it is indeed, I'd be willing to support it if it was co-sponsored by both sides of the table.
Okay, thank you. Roll call vote, please.
Smithers,
Yes.
Tanisha,
Yes.
Perkins,
Yes.
Akers,
Yes.
Fay,
No.
Haggard,
No.
Piafo,
No.
Burke,
No.
Arquette,
No,
Terminelli,
No.
Curran, yes. Reagan,
Yes.
Forsythe,
Yes.
Lightfoot,
Yes.
Sheridan,
Yes.
9 yes, 6 no.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to move on to the tentative budget review for 2021. Mrs. Doyle.
So this evening will be the remaining 6 departments associated with the tentative budget. And I just want to mention that certainly as we continue to work through COVID-19, both at the state and federal level, the contours of the basis by which we've put this budget together will continue to evolve. And I think what we're looking at is a document that takes into consideration some things that we have been seeing over the last few years that have benefited the county, that perhaps we haven't looked as favorably on in a conservative way. And we're trying to make sure that when we ask departments to put forward their best effort, that that's the document you see in front of you. So just going down through, I wanted to spend a moment talking about, I spent some time last week talking about the contingency accounts. And, but overall, the county administrator's budget for the legislators is decreased by 1.9 million. And the basis of that largely is due to the successful negotiations of contracts. And you'll see in the overall redistribution throughout the budget, those salaries are now sitting out in department budget lines. So that makes it helpful. In this year's budget, for contingency spending, the board set aside 5.4 million, and that included the amounts that I just mentioned. So far this year, in resolutions, we've spent $651,522. That doesn't take into account yet the transition for CSEA, indigent defenders, and soon to be Council 82 salaries. And certainly with that comes other increased expenses as well. So the current balance in contingency is 4.7 million. Once those contracts are adjusted, in some cases we bring to you resolutions whereby we move those out to the department lines. So we'll talk more about that in a little bit. I have made a grade adjustment in this 2021 tentative budget for the assistant administrator from a band 3 to a band 5. I have in the partner agency lines, there's a shift you probably noticed for Cornell Cooperative Extension. And that was a flat amount countywide. As you may recall, the Cornell Cooperative Extension sits in two budgets, public health and in the Board of Legislators. So the transition was made over to the Board of Legislators, and what we'd like to do going forward is to measure the work that they're doing directly with public health and have that in a standalone contract that comes to you for consideration. So you'll see a net difference, but overall it's a zero for the county. The shift will be reflected next year. For the IDA, you'll see an increase of $50,000 in keeping with their contract. That brings them in at $300,000 for 2021. For the Chamber of Commerce, later on this agenda, we'll request that you approve them as our tourism agent for 2021 through 2023 at a flat rate for next year and for 2022. And then in 2023, a 5% increase to 50% of the occupancy tax share. However, because we're basing their appropriation on the 5-year rolling actuals, that makes the base appropriation for them for next year an additional $11,719. Looking back at the first contract we've done with them, you probably saw, I believe that the summaries are now loaded onto Google Drive for you to take a look at. There was an additional $143,000. So you may recall in the Chamber of Commerce contract, what we put together was 75 cents of every dollar that came in above budget, we distributed once a year to the Chamber of Commerce. Approximately 38 to 42,000 a year for a total in the 3-year contract of 143,000. That part of the contract will remain for the next term. So for the trail coordinator, we returned that amount to 72,000. I think there's many conversations going on right now about what next year may look like as the trail continues to be developed and the transition to a potential permitting, which we had talked about in the 2020 budget. However, COVID-19 changed everything. So this is a good opportunity, I think, to take a look at further development of the trail, as well as what the trail system is going to look like for the future. Historical Association remained flat at 15,000. And as I mentioned to you, we've separated off the historian component of the Historical Association and budgeted that at 3,000 for a first year appropriation. We're not sure exactly yet what that will look like. We're working right now with our interim historian, Nancy LaFavor, who will be working towards what next year will look like. She'd like to meet with the local historians in the county before the end of the year and potentially bring forward a resolution celebrating the local historians and the work that they're doing. And then Soil and Water Conservation District is again at the same amount at $30,423 as 2020. So those are your partner agencies. I did want to give you an update on the temporary part-time work that Mr. Zimmerman was providing to us this year. A number of functions up to and including assisting at DSS as well as with budget. And earlier on with COVID, a total of $12,550 have been spent to that end, so that you're aware. Any questions on the county administrator's budget at this time? One other area that I wanted to mention, right here, was the total available, and I'll provide you with that before I'm done, in the Employee Appreciation Fund. So I'll get that before I finish tonight. I have that here, right here somewhere. Next is the county attorney's budget. We have made some adjustments. We had some earlier conversations about the risk manager. We did combine some functions for the compliance officer with the risk manager, and with that made a great adjustment from a band 5 to a band 6. So that position we'll be looking to fill toward the end of the year for a January 2021 start. Certainly a void that has been in the department since May, and we're looking hopefully to have some good candidates to fill that spot. But overall, county attorney's budget came in just above this year's amounts. Highway department, this has seen probably the most dramatic adjustment in appropriations and revenue out of all departments in the county. A decrease of $9.9 million in revenue. As you know, and have reviewed my communications, that this year was the largest year we've had in probably 20 associated with the work of highway. With regard to the appropriations, a $9.7 million reduction, which leaves them approximately $200,000 higher than in 2020 for 2021. The road fund balance, which is the only fund balance that we're proposing to use in 2021, is going from 1.63 million down to 500,000. We believe this will provide the opportunities that we've seen in the last 3 years to potentially add an additional project, but also to continue with the workload that Highway's been able to accomplish in the last few years. Next year would be the second phase in the funding component of equipment replacements at Highway. So a couple of conversations took place with regard to either financing or utilizing fund balance to make that acquisition. You may recall in 2016, we issued a bond for $3 million that we will pay until 2026. The idea being that we would have the potential in 2021 to take another bond for the same amount and have 2 bond payments at that time. After discussing this with the budget team, my recommendation is that in 2021, early in 2021, we provide the opportunity for the board to consider appropriating approximately $2 million for the purchase of equipment. Some of the smaller pieces of equipment are budgeted and they're sitting in the equipment lines. However, for the larger purchases, and rather than issue another note and finance, we'd rather pay for this out of fund balance. But it also keeps it from going on the levy. Any questions on Highway? Don is with us still. If there's any questions. Also from a staffing perspective, remember, while I know we did have some pointed conversations with Don earlier on, we did just make a transition for 10 laborers, if you remember, to motor equipment operators. So there are 2 remaining laborers. Also, Mr. Chambers was able to hold back on utilizing the temporary help this year. He did not employ those folks. So there's been a number of, I think, sacrifices as well as challenges they've faced.
Mr. Burke, you have a question for Mr. Chambers?
Yes, I do. As we look at cost benefit, Don, I'm wondering, in past years you've talked about preventive maintenance, and I know we had I listened to a speaker from Cornell talk about the amount of money that's saved by doing preventive maintenance. And I guess I'm wondering, as we look at the budget, what additional resources spent today could save significant money down the road? And if you wouldn't mind commenting on that, I'd appreciate it.
But one of the biggest bangs for the buck for as far as road maintenance is surface treating. Much like folks will put a driveway sealer on their driveway to extend the pavement by keeping the moisture from penetrating into the pavement and creating potholes, and also the weathering from the sun, causing the pavements to become brittle. Some type of surface treatment has proven to pay dividends over the long run if you apply the surface treatment at the proper time.
Is there a ratio done of cost to savings?
There is. It's quite significant when you invest early on. Usually, if somewhere between the 3 to 5 year period, if you invest in a sealant of the pavement, it will extend the service life of that initial investment. The surface treatment is about 17,000 per mile, depending on the width of the pavement, and that's the lower end of the oil and stone. But it typically will extend the service life, another 3 to 5 years on the pavement. When you're talking, 150,000 a mile to get roughly what would be a 10 or 12 year cycle. It's a good investment.
Okay, Mr. Perkins.
Alan, when you do that surface treatment, do you have to close the roads down for a period of time for it to cure?
Well, the surface treatment depends on the surface treatment. But you know, the oil and stone, typically it's kept open. You'd close a lane and do a lane closure, but it cures that day and you put traffic on it. You have to put up like loose stone, fresh oil signs, because there will be additional stones that would be on top of the pavement. But it's open that day.
Okay. Mrs. Doyle?
Any other questions with regard to highway right now? Okay, thank you, Don.
Thank you.
Certainly, in the summary that was provided to you, health insurance is always part of the conversation, and we're seeing an increase for 2021 of 1.8 million just in health and medical insurance. That's not including a pharmacy increase of almost 600,000 as well. This year, we're looking at coming in over budget by about 2.4. And that is due to some extraordinary challenges we've had this year to the plan. So we're watching those very closely, but we're looking at some increased costs in retirement as well, another $500,000 associated with our New York State retirement costs. That also, with the settlement of contracts, that increases like Social Security, some of those kinds of things. So those are measured out in the budget for you as well. However, we did also, for the first time, capture a modest amount of the high water funds that we've been seeing for the last few years associated with the St. Lawrence River and the flows there. While we've been seeing much closer to about 400,000, you're seeing about 200 in the budget, only because this year there weren't as many issues. So we aren't certain of what next year is, except to know that the flows are as high as they've been and they're being managed by NIFA. So that's a number that hasn't been in before. And then we also looked at sales tax and had many debates about what that number looks like. All of you have seen Renee's latest news, and for once, we're at the top of the list. How long that will hold and what those numbers will be are any of our best guess. We certainly saw the detriment to New York City in the amount of over $300 million, but we saw the increase to St. Lawrence County that was unpredicted. So in saying that, looking back at the last 2 years and the increases that we've appreciated, we did increase not only the revenue we expect, but the distribution to the towns and villages. We'll watch that closely and certainly communicate with you regularly. But there's 1.3 million in additional revenue in sales tax, which means 569,000 increased for revenue for distribution to towns and villages in the city. Any questions on treasurer? I believe Renee's with us. Okay, real property. As of late, we've had some questions relative to the chargeback associated with real property. That I can tell you from 2 years ago is reduced by over $18,000. And let me clarify that the services that real property provides on an ongoing basis are divided out amongst the towns and villages. And much like you saw when provision of the same services was provided to Ogdensburg, they used the same formula to divide out the cost and actually reduced it after their temporarily appointed assessor, Mr. Schnorr, was able to do some of that work. That being said, there are expected to be, I believe, 3 reevaluations next year. So this coming year, there's only a modest increase in the chargeback of $1,818. So overall, the last 2 years, we're looking at a $16,000 reduction in the chargeback to the towns and villages. The last department is solid waste, and as you know, that's a zero county cost revenue paid for by tip fees. 2 years ago, some of you may remember that Dank offered a split in equipment purchases up to $700,000. We budgeted that over 2 years, and we're able to take advantage of their revenue, much like you heard tonight. They're willing to split things 50-50 with us. So that reduced the budget for next year by $237,000 associated with equipment. Certainly helped move forward, move the needle on the equipment needs at solid waste. They still have 1 more year, I believe, associated with the repay. Some of you may not recall, but solid waste took their own insurance policy and no longer relies on the county's liability fund when there are accidents and or challenges that the department has to address. Going back as far as we could, the amount was provided to them and we divided it out into 4 payments. I believe they have 1 more year next year to pay us back, but that's $213,250 included in their budget. Also, they provide a reimbursement to the county for the insurances. Again, as an enterprise fund, the staff is paid for by the tip fees. So 200,000 is included to pay the county for the benefits that are provided to their staff. But overall, the reduction for solid waste, because it's easy in departments like the treasurer and the county clerk's office, I'm sure when you look at the quarterly report, it's a challenge because the sum totals look fine. Similar here, the sum total is 0. But I think it's important for you also to understand whether there's an increase or a decrease to providing the service. And for 2021, tentatively speaking, there's a $297,000 reduction in the overall cost of solid waste. Any questions about that?
Mr. Forsythe.
Not about solid waste, but I do have one for the treasurer.
Okay.
If that's all right.
Yeah, I think she's with us.
Renee, has there been any effort to capture, get an idea what internet sales tax is? Is there any movement to track it and see where that is on a statewide level?
But I think internet sales tax in general is already in a category. They track it by its NAICS codes, NAICS codes, but it's not segregating. I think what you really want to get to is what the additional funding was for the Wayfair decision, and that's not being tracked separately.
There's no way to break it out.
Separate it out.
It's all reported. Internet sales tax is internet sales tax.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And for 2021, we also took into consideration the hospital distress fund, which is going to have to be paid in the early part of next year, as well as the additional AIM payments that continue to be split. I believe it's May and December, but those payments will continue to be removed prior to arriving at the county. Any other questions on that?
The net amount is equal to
Which one?
the two AIM and the hospital emergency fund?
Hospital distress fund is 453,000 and AIM is 1,056,000. We have not heard there's been any adjustments to those amounts.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay,
Good.
on to my next.
Yes.
Nicole has her hands up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead,
Sorry,
Nicole.
just quickly, and Ruth, I'm sure that you mentioned it and I probably missed it. On back in the Board of Legislators, in our 200 or in our 2020 modified versus our adopted, there's an increase of $500,000 for other fees and services. What was that for?
So that was the resolution that you approved a few months back over the mental health commitment bills.
Okay.
We have two people
Okay.
committed, remember, about $71,000 a month. And actually, I may be right back to you next month for some more because those bills continue to come in at about the same pace.
So that's an example of where the state used to reimburse us 70%?
Half. Half.
50%.
Yep.
Now St. Louis County's on the hook for all of it.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. So I can go right into it?
Yes,
Okay.
please. Yeah.
So with that being said, if there's no objections, I deliver for the Finance Committee to the Board of Legislators, the 2021 tentative budget. The reason that I mention this, and for those of you who haven't been through this process before, county law requires that the budget officer deliver the budget to the Finance Committee. Being that now we've gone through all of the departments, at this point, the Finance Committee can take that up and deliver it to the Board of Legislators. As a committee of the whole, it seems a little unusual because the same board sits as committee that they do as a board. But as a formality, I like to make sure that we deliver from the Finance Committee to the Board of Legislators for consideration. Okay? And just have a couple updates. To give you an update briefly on COVID-19, I excused the doctors from this week's meeting. They will join us next week for the board meeting. But I can let you know that our current caseload of positives moved over the weekend from 373 on Friday to 389 today. There are 38 active, and that's an additional 16 over the weekend. 3 of those are hospitalized. Going back 1 week, so remember the 38 active number. Going back 1 week, we were at 17 active, and going back 2 weeks, we were at 9 active. So we certainly are seeing the uptick, and certainly the volume has a great impact on our public health staff and other department staff, I want you to know, who continue to be helpful to public health as well. We went also from 2 weeks ago from testing 64,000 to 1 week ago, 76,000, to this week testing 82,168 folks. So the numbers are certainly climbing, and I have not extracted the duplicate tests, in case you were wondering. But those numbers, certainly some context can be provided next week from Dr. McGuire and Dr. Williams. I did want to report out to you a transfer.
We have a question
Oh,
from
sure.
Mr. Denisha, or a comment.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Ruth, just I guess just a comment on the number of tests. That can be misleading because it's not a true indicator of the percentage of our population that has been tested. Because if there are numerous people that have to be tested
Weekly, bi-weekly, back.
So I just wanted to, and I think a lot of folks see that. They think we've got 110,000 people in San Luis County. We've got 75,000 people tested. Well, that doesn't mean that we've had 75% of the population tested. It just, many are repeat.
That's right, absolutely, and that's why I mentioned I don't have a way to reduce the duplicate tests.
Thank you, Mr. Denisha. Mr. Smithers.
I have a question that maybe you don't have the answer, but
I can find out.
Dr. McGuire could.
Sure.
Someone asked me about visitation of nursing home, particularly in Ogdensburg. They were told they needed to get a test for COVID before they visited their spouse there. And so inquiring about getting tested, she contacted Clifton Pine Hospital and was told that they would do it and she would have to pay for it. But she called Claxton Hepburn and was told that they would do it and she did not have to pay for it. So could you clarify that, what the discrepancy might be, or Dr. McGuire sometime and report back to us?
I can tell you.
It should be uniform.
Yes, and a couple of things. I can tell you, and I can certainly have her expand on it a little bit as far as numbers go, but we have been provided through the state a number of tests that if those are the tests that are used to administer the test, there is no cost attached. The state provides them and the state runs the lab work that goes with it. However, in other areas, they don't have necessarily either any more or maybe they weren't given any state test. So the state site was at Lawrence Ave. However, we have been in receipt of some that will be shared with Clifton Pine, and that may be the reason, but I'll find out and let you know. I also wanted to mention that they have submitted a application to be a vaccine site. What that looks like and when that will occur, we don't know, but our public health department has made the application. Kevin?
Mr. Forsyth.
Just following up on Mr. Smithers, what's the cost of the test at Clifton Pine? Did you happen to hear?
No, you didn't say.
I'd just be curious.
Not inexpensive, I can get the exact number.
I'd be curious what
Yeah.
that number
It's
is.
like $100 is what,
Is that what it is, 100?
well, I can't speak to that specific, but I
Does
know.
insurance pay any of it?
Yes, usually, but
Okay,
I can find out exactly. I
Okay,
can speak to
I
that.
appreciate
Yeah,
it.
it's definitely been a challenge for folks, for sure.
yeah.
The transfer of funds I wanted to report out to you is for the probation department. That is for their data imaging of $2,416.16 is being transferred from the board budget over to probation to pay for that. Next up is early voting underway, as many of you have seen or heard. Human Services Center is the location in St. Lawrence County for early voting. Mask wearing requirements and social distancing have been a challenge, with over 500 on Saturday, 404 yesterday, and 624 today. So quite a turnout, certainly with folks, including our public health department that's there. Congested area for folks, and we're going to try tomorrow and make some adjustments so that it isn't either interfering with other folks trying to get in, like for DMV appointments, and that folks are ensured that at least there's some social distancing and some precautions are in place. They worked on it over all weekend, but those are significant numbers to manage in that area. Okay? Wanted to give you an update. We did talk briefly about it at services. The Harold B. Smith building, where DSS is located, will be undergoing some physical changes starting this week to relocate staff. This will require that they're going to move out to the Human Services Center in the back where DSS employment unit's located. Initially, this will be the HEAP unit, but once they're returned, our anticipation is to move right on to reception and then hopefully continue throughout the building. Funding's been made available that you've approved at least preliminarily at committee that will assist to improve the space from the carpet to the ceiling tile and everywhere in between.
We're hopeful that staff will be able to utilize the vacant space and we can claim against the rent while they're there. That, I think, will have a big impact. I don't believe that renovations in any real form at the social services building have taken place in a number of years. We are moving forward with our department head training days. We've had to adapt. So the last 2 years, what I've done is had department heads basically give me their whole day, and we do a number of sessions throughout. So considering COVID and how we've adapted to most everything this year, we're going to split it into the last 2 remaining department head meetings of the year and just split them up into longer sessions than we would normally, which typically it's an hour. So take 2 or 3 hours to try to get through all of those trainings that are required and maybe have a little fun. You all have received an email from HR regarding training that you're required to complete. Johnny will follow up. Certainly, hopefully you'll have a chance to take a look at that information. And she'll be on the operations committee in November, which operations, services, and finance are all separate in November. And she will put that at the tail end of the agenda. So we'll just finish out the meeting with that. Next week at our board meeting, you'll be honoring members of county staff who have 30+ years of service. We have 13 of them this year. And at this time, we don't have any RSVPs yet. Our plan is, if anyone does decide to join us, that we'll call one family in at a time, or one person in at a time and have them recognized. Certainly a challenging time to do those kinds of things, but we want to still make it available and try to have some normalcy. Similarly, in December, we do have one memorial that we'll also be making resolution for. And again, if they're able, the family's able to join us, it's a Paquin family, then we'll also do a similar thing. And then last on my list is just an update that I'm hopeful that Thursday we'll begin our partnership with Allied Health and BOCES and have 3 students that will be joining to begin the training process to assist in public health. And with the numbers I've just presented to you tonight, it will certainly be valuable. Any questions?
Mr. Burke.
Ruth, our remote working, how is that doing? Are we getting all the work done that we need to get done when people work from home, and how does that contribute towards protecting the public and other employees?
So a couple things. As you'll recall in March, when we had a reduced density in our offices, we were required to make determinations about what had to be done. And at that time, we were able, within about 48 hours, to take 50% or more of our offices remote. And at that time, again, we were learning how to, as being forced into this environment, how to make the best of it and how to get the work done and serve the public. It went extremely well. In July, after moving into phase 2, meeting the criteria to move into phase 2, executive order provided for those office densities to again be increased. So that has been an ongoing process, but the work now has to be 100% complete. And as you know, for example, the DMV, we're still in a reduced environment where they aren't allowed to have people in except for appointment. But in large part, in some areas, we've done extremely well in the remote working environment, understanding that many of our employees work in the field already. So they've had the opportunity to both work in the field, work from home, and then work in the office. And it's gone very well. What we're working also now, up to next week, to bring our folks back into the office and to get folks back in knowing 100% of the work has to be complete, and that our numbers, while we continue to watch them, we have to ensure the safety of the public and as well as our staff. Does that answer your question?
Well, I guess in part, Ruth, I guess I'm wondering, you know, we trust you to develop a $250 million budget and with relatively few questions. And I guess I'm wondering, you know, should we not extend that same trust when it comes to managing the workforce and you deciding who can safely, who can effectively work remotely and who needs to be present you know, my opinion is we're still in the middle of the COVID, and we need, first and foremost, to protect the public who comes in for services, and we need to protect our workforce as well. And I think we best do that by looking for alternative strategies rather than having congested workspaces, allowing people to work from home, because some of those workspaces the public has to come into. And I guess I'm wondering why we wouldn't continue with the remote working if the work is getting done and it enhances public safety and it enhances employee safety. I guess I'm wondering why we wouldn't continue that. And the last part of it is that I would strongly encourage you, and I for one think you should be empowered to do that. Run the organization, Ruth, as it best meets the needs of the public and best meets the needs of the organization.
Well, I think we would be wise to keep in mind some of the benefits that we learned that we probably could have never come by any other way, being forced into a remote environment. And I think in large part, you've seen great benefit, if not extraordinary benefit, from having folks be able to work flexibly. We were able to get some of that function into our agreements with flexible and 4-day work weeks. But if this has required a different level of working with our staff and working with the public. So I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Is our drive-through DMV still closed?
It is.
And that's by executive order?
It is.
So you can get a donut, you can get a cup of coffee, you can get a hamburger, you're exchanging money, but we can't do the drive-through. Is there anything that can be done about that, Mr. County Attorney, as far as we are one of 2 counties that has a drive-through?
Yes.
So what would we have to do? Petition for relief?
My understanding, the other county did actually attempt to reopen their drive-through, and the state stepped in and enforced the executive order to shut it down.
And do you know, Ruth, what percentage are actually receipts are down from DMV from people utilizing mailing into the state?
I can't attribute it to them conducting the business online, but I believe our last check was about 20%.
20% reduction in revenues. Thank you. Mr. Forsyth.
On that subject, if you, is it possible to find out what the annual amount, rough idea, of the 12.5% we keep of people renewing registrations in-house as opposed to mailing them in?
Yep.
Because I think we're gonna find out that revenue source is gone forever, pretty much.
It's a challenge. Yep, I can get that for you. Certainly, and our treasurer, if she could, would like to speak for a minute, maybe after Margaret.
Mrs. Haggard?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have 2 questions. One I missed when you were talking about early voting, Mrs. Doyle. Is there any plan, or will there be any plan to expand that to other municipalities in the future? Of course, we're not going to have probably a turnout like this for another 4 years, possibly. But have there been any plans to perhaps have it in a few other towns?
I think there's been conversations about that. I think with the concentration of staff that we have currently, it's a challenge for us. So they made the determination, at least, last year and this year, to maintain that in Canton. But I could find out what their thoughts are on that.
By the way, I commend our Mr. Nichols and Mrs. Bacon, because that's a lot of people to have on those days. Did you say over 600 and something today?
624 today, yes.
Wow. Are there any accommodations made for people to remain remote who have comorbidities or problems that might contribute to them being more susceptible to COVID-19?
During the response, there has been, but I think in this effort to get folks back into the workplace, we're looking at the benefits available through both the federal and state government as far as some of their time being covered. If they aren't, but they wouldn't be allowed to work. And prior to the return to work component, they were able to at least work some from home.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Recognize Renee for a moment.
Sure.
Renee, to share an auction update with us?
Yes, thank you. Yes, thanks for letting me squeeze that in. I don't know if everyone's aware, but this year our real property tax auction was done entirely online. It's the first time we've done that, but with all of the executive orders, I guess, you know, and we've had to how we do it completely this year. So we went with an online auction rather than just calling it off and waiting until next year. And I have some very, very preliminary numbers. I just wanted to share that with you. So we did, it was a 10-day period. It was from October 16th through October 26th. And some of you may have heard some of this information already, so forgive me. But our final tally on the bids on was wrapped up this afternoon was, well, let me start with the number of parcels. I'm sorry. Total parcels in this year, we only had 110 parcels. That was largely due to staffing changes in my office. We had a title searcher who moved into a position by the property tax supervisor. And it was just the timing of finding a replacement. And, you know, we're always doing 2 to 3 auctions at a time in different phases, but the be done before a parcel makes it in. So we had 110 parcels this year versus last year there was 168, to give you an idea. So it was quite a few less. We had the number of registered bidders, 388. Last year was our biggest year and still holds the record at 395, but we were right up there. The total of parcels with bids, every parcel this year received a bid. One of them was only $50 and there was no back bid on it, but this year we had, you know, we always have a few that don't receive bids on it. So that seemed to fare better as well. And the total number of on parcels this year was a little bit over $2.3 million. It's $2,332,793. Last year was $1,412,995. So it's over $900,000 better than last year, and with 58 fewer parcels. So it's pretty incredible on that. And also, to give it some context, though, the expenses, which are really the taxes, school taxes, village taxes, our total for the parcels that were in this year auction. This includes the environmental properties too that have some, you know, health back balances. It was $1,212,000 and some change, and last year was 1.7 million. So we were was less owed in taxes because there's 58 fewer parcels, but we still were tremendously higher in the bids. Now we'll see if we collect them all. That will be the next step. But I just kind of wanted to give you the initial numbers. These also don't include. I think we did a count today. Mr. Button can confirm it. I think there are 7 parcels that we have agreements in place to split the sales on. So I don't know quite yet what those bids were, so we can't calculate the 50% that we pay the EPA or the oil spill fund. I'm not quite sure exactly what those numbers look like, but that was for you for now, but we'll bring you some final numbers when we get them.
Mr. Berg.
Renee, would you entertain doing the auctioning the same way in another year? I mean, like Ruth said, some of the experiences we were forced into with our employees with the COVID produced some very good results. Certainly sounds like this produced some very good results. Would you consider repeating this process, or can we repeat it? No, no, I think that we could certainly look at it. It's really, I think it's hard to tell though, if this is a result, you know, it's all online. We had online availability the last couple of years, you know, and I think the number, we only had like 11 registered bidders, online bidders last year. Maybe it was 11 the first year and last year. So I don't, you know, I think this year everybody's gotten used to doing
line. So I don't know if people are going to want to come out in person. We haven't heard a lot of negative feedback yet, but it's early. So I'm waiting to see, if people were unable to actually, do what they wanted to with the auction. So I'd certainly entertain the notion of it again. I can't say that it hasn't been successful so far.
Has the auctioneer given you any feedback? Has he done other auctions in a similar fashion?
They have, that was really what convinced it, because, it seems like it was constantly changing what we're going to do. We had actually lined up we had a venue up. We were going to do it actually in Ogdensburg at the school district. And then as the year progressed, we had to move it to, we were speaking with Potsdam, the arena in Potsdam. And then I think we received another to schedule conferences. And I think we're the only county in the state that actually held the conferences, because that order was lifted, I think, last week. It's been pretty difficult, I think, to just on. But our auctioneers had said that they had a couple of online onlys that had been very successful. So we decided to go with it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Forsythe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. From what I watched today, Renee, the last minute, I would say a majority of the properties at least doubled in that last extension minute. It was unbelievable to watch.
They grew.
If you're bidding against it, it wouldn't be the greatest feature, but for the county's perspective, it's I'll bet you several at least doubled, if not tripled, in the last minute. It's unbelievable.
I'm told that today's bids from the start of the day today to the end of the day were over $1 million.
Yeah. Okay.
In bids, and we were watching some of them just go up. 5 minutes later, it went up $50,000, and a list of 10 bids, as you can see the history.
I think I watched some of those myself. Yeah.
Yeah, it was crazy.
So this is what Auctions International does. There are several counties that actually sell their properties. Same thing with the state of Massachusetts. It's very common. This is what they do. It's the accuracy is right on. You submit the bid, and if the winning bidder doesn't come through with the money, they go to the next highest one. So I would say, like, all the person power, manpower, or whatever you want to say in today's environment, that you didn't have to reserve a place, you didn't have to have officials there. There wasn't anybody complaining. You didn't see my card, I bid on that, I thought I won. You don't have any of that. Plus, all the bidders are actually pre-approved. So I think it's a rousing success, and it's a no-brainer. We're up $900,000 on less properties. It's a no-brainer. Yeah. What else?
Resolutions we could do. That's okay with you?
All right. So our first resolution is designate the St. Lawrence County Chamber of Commerce as the St. Lawrence County Tourism Promotion Agent, and authorizing the chair to sign the 2021 to 2023 contract. Moved by Mr. Denisha, seconded by Mr. Reagan and Mr. Forsythe. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. The next resolution is adopting the amended St. Lawrence County Title VI plan and authorizing the chair to sign the plan. Moved by Ms. Curran, second by Mr. Sheridan. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Next resolution is authorizing the chair to sign a contract with the city of Ogdensburg for hazmat team services. Moved by Mr. Reagan, second by Mr. Forsythe. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Okay.
And the last item that I have to update, and I'll make it brief as we spent time on budget this evening already, is the third quarter report you received in your agendas. Provides to you approximately 10 departments that have exceeded their 75%, which is certainly that magic calendar year number of the budget. And I can say that 9 out of 10 of those are driven largely by revenue. Certainly, as we look at the challenges, as I mentioned before, county clerk and the treasurer, Those numbers are a little less reflective only because they do cost to run, as you might imagine. But as I mentioned to you in the tentative budget presentation, 11.8 million is outstanding from the state with regard to social services, highway, and community services that we are aware of. Certainly, as we draw closer to the end of the calendar year and we're seeing those quarterly grant reports being submitted, we'll be able to tally up what we're missing perhaps from a reimbursement associated with that. But overall, the total appropriations, all funds, is at 64%. So with COVID, as you might recall, we've spent a lot less, we've done a lot less with regard to employee education, travel, things of that nature. But also with revenue, we're at 68%. So fortunately, we're still ahead modestly, but neither area are we at the spend or receive the revenue that we would expect in a normal year. So other than that, if there's questions, certainly you can direct them to the department specifically or send me an email. Lastly, on Google Drive was the capital project summary. I did just want to point out that with one piece of the project remaining, the website redesign has been successful and came in $5,192 under budget. So our hope is by year end to get the intranet up and running, which will be a communication piece between staff and supervisors and information sharing about things that are happening in each department and really facilitate better communication between departments on a real-time basis. Also, we have certainly seen volume on our website, largely driven by COVID, to our website of over, I believe, 15,000 since we launched in July, going largely around 40,000 a month since that time. So we're seeing lots of hits. I'm sure they check the data and look at the maps that we put up every day, but we'll take it because they may end up bouncing to a different department and getting information or assistance that they may need. So certainly information out there available for you, and we'll continue tracking it and getting you updates as we hear on any potential changes with revenue expectations. We'll make sure you're aware of that and be able to work with the department to address those. And the last thing I wanted to mention is at the end of the meeting, we'll distribute to you what's right now electronically, the department summaries by committee. And then we'll also get those out to all of you on Zoom this week, as well as Suzanne, I've got your cards, so I'll get those out to you as well. We'll make sure we make connections and get those out to you as quick as we can. Any questions?
Okay, seeing none, let's move on to committee reports. First up, Mr. Denisha with Cornell Cooperative Extension.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We had our annual meeting Thursday, October 22nd, last week. It was different because normally we've had as you know, it's a dinner meeting, and it turned into I guess a cider and cookies meeting. It was because we had it was via Zoom. I think we had 12 members at the farm, but the rest of the folks were zooming in, and we at elections we had a couple new folks elected to the board, Lonnie Rucker and Lindsay Schultz.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Denisha. Next up is Ms. Curran with the Fish and Wildlife Management Board. Ms. Curran?
We've had no update since what they put out in September.
Okay,
No meeting.
thank you. Ms. Terminelli for the Fisheries Advisory Board.
We have not had a meeting.
Okay, thank you. Governor Fair Board, Mr. Smithers.
Nothing further right now.
Thank you. So Highway and Solid Waste Committee, Mr. Sheridan.
We haven't had a meeting.
Okay, IDA, Mr. Reagan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The St. Lawrence County IDA was reported recently that they took a look at what happened from February to now, and since the COVID hit, St. Lawrence County lost 3,100 jobs. As of September, state unemployment had found that we are back to 41,000 jobs where we were before COVID hit. So don't ask me for an explanation, but it's good news it shows the efforts to keep as many of the employers in operation has worked, and hopefully we can maintain this. And three other things: the IDA is hopes to move forward this in January with a $700,000 project to finish the Newell building so that the new industrial center will be available to for tenants by spring. They're continuing to work on the Arconic Business Park, which would make use of some of the vacant business property available that Arconic, which used to be part of Alcoa, owns. And the IDA sent out an RFP for companies to look for that specialize in the dairy industry to try to find businesses that could come to St. Lawrence County to take advantage of our milk supply. As we all know, the dairy industry is one of our most important industries, and if we are able to get more of that milk supply used, it will benefit not just our dairy farmers, but the entire supply chain of businesses that are dependent on the dairy industry, as well as the people who directly go to work for one of these companies. There's no guarantee that we're going to be successful. These are always long shots. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they plant a grain that germinates years later. The important thing is for us to get out there into the country, make people aware that St. Lawrence County is a major center of the dairy industry, that we've got Jefferson County nearby. We've got farmers who are producing milk, who are producing quality products, and hopefully we can find companies to help use this wonderful product that we produce.
Thank you, Mr. Reagan. RBRDA, Mr. Forsythe.
There's been no meeting. You skipped Tony too. There's been no meeting.
There's a reason for that, Tony. Go ahead. Go.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're Debbie and her group of volunteers did a yeoman's task to get their trails ready for the snowmobile groomers to come out. We're currently obviously in hunting season, so we're in the mix and ready to go for hopefully a lot of snow this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Mr. Forsythe.
Once again, there's been no meeting since the last one, so I have nothing to report. Thank you.
Sorry. St. Lawrence County Chamber of Commerce, Mrs. Haggard.
Thank you. We had a meeting on Thursday, October 8th. Brooke, Mrs. Rouse gave us a report on the craft food and wine outdoor market that was held at the Power and Equipment Museum in Madrid. And from 9:30 to 12, they had over 1,000 people come, a total of 750 vehicles and 41 vendors. So it was very successful. The other big news from the chamber is that they're going to be reorganizing. Brooke will be stepping down, or laterally, I'm not sure exactly how this is going to go. She will be the director of tourism, and they're conducting a search right now for an executive director. So a little bit of change in the organization. And I believe there was a press release this week explaining that. Our next meeting is on the 10th of December. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Haggard. Mr. Burke and the Soil and Water Conservation District.
They reviewed all the performance expectations for this past year. The soil and water staff met them all. They have plans to for next year to continue applying for grants for culvert replacement, and they talked about Aaron's work with our county forester's work with the Emerald Ash Borer. The plan will be to continue his work with the municipalities in identifying the ash trees that pose a danger and the spread of the Emerald Ash Borer. They talked about the cover crop program, that it wasn't 100% utilized, but the acreage was very close to what we were funded for. And I don't know, Kevin, if you have anything else.
No, I think you covered it. Okay. Let's move into old and new business. Before we go on to the resolution, Mr. Burke, was your highway question answered?
It was, and I guess I would just say that I think at some point it would be good to know, and I'm not suggesting we spend more money. I'd hate to be accused of that, but I do think it's wise to know, have some assessment of what we could save over the course of 5 or 10 years by doing some preventive work right now. Again, we may decide not to do it, but I do think it's at least useful information to have as we consider what's important.
So, Mr. Chambers, if you're with us, could you tell us how many miles of road that you resealed or repaved this? Are you there, Don?
I am. Yes, we paved over 27 miles. We did this a surface treatment on approximately 13 miles, and we did a rut filling on probably another 25, 30 miles. That's a little harder for me to gauge because it's spotty repairs.
Where would you list prevention on your list of priorities on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being the most important?
Well, certainly I think our structures are most important. As far as maintenance and replacement, certainly without a structure, once a structure is closed, the road is no longer effective. So I think our focus always needs to be on our structures, keeping our large culverts and bridges open as much as possible. But certainly one of the biggest bangs for the buck is like what I was saying. Next would come into the pavement maintenance to keep the roads, safe and open.
For your projection for 2021, how many miles do you think that you'll be able to do in the same fashion?
That is a difficult thing to answer. I do not know where our CHIPS funding will be, and our paving program is basically our CHIPS program. So I'm hoping that we will be able to be at least 27, 28 miles. If we get, but again, I do not know where our CHIPS funding will be for 2021 at this point.
Would the expectation be, from things that we're hearing from the state, that there'd be a 20% reduction?
That's at least. And there may be some other transportation areas that may take a hit as well.
Okay, thank you. Before we go into the resolution, I believe we have, thank you, Don. We have the Mayor Courier online. I'd like to speak, like to address the board. Tim, are you there? There he is, okay.
I am. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know that tonight you're going to take up the topic of medication-assisted treatment, more specifically, potentially methadone clinic here in Messina. So I first want to talk to you about in support of that, and I appreciate the chance to appear. Many of you know I had a 27-year career in law enforcement. In the last few years, I've been working with prevention councils in St. Lawrence, Jefferson, and Lewis County, working on building a strategic plan here in the North Country to deal with the opiate issues. So I just finished a strategic plan, a workforce assessment plan, a needs assessment, and a sustainability plan to deal with that. So medicine-assisted treatment is a big part of that. Methadone has very proven success, and I'm really happy that considering Messina for that. We have to continue to work on reducing the stigma and community awareness and prevention, but finding ways so they can have successful recovery. And that's what MAT is about, making sure that people can be successful in their recoveries and go on to live highly productive and successful lives. A couple stats, or one stat that I wanted you to recognize. It's not just people that are substance use disorder issues that they have, but it's other people that are in our county. And our study and survey showed that 29% of St. Lawrence County residents live with chronic pain every day that requires something to get through the day. 27% in Jefferson County and 18% in Lewis County. So it's not just substance abuse disorder individuals, it's other citizens who are using medications to get through the day, something like that. So I know there's been a number, there's 3 organizations that are being considered, and I'll pretty much stay out of that fight, but I am very concerned about the location of this would be. My preference would be to have it in the village. I know that the St. Lawrence Health System is being considered tonight. I will remind you that they own a very big facility in our community, which has a lot of vacant space in it lately, and a number of other structures within the village that they have that could be considered. So I really would love to see this grant accepted, but I'd also like to have some conversations with the stakeholders, people in this community like me, as to where that would go. Great affection for the St. Lawrence Center Mall. I'm concerned about the condition of it and what the long-term availability of that structure is going to be and how that could impact this clinic. If we get this clinic, get it up and running, and then it loses its location, I think that would be detrimental to the long-term success of it, and it really concerns me. So again, I urge you to support it tonight. We need this in this region. We have one of the biggest obstacles to treatment in the North Country is availability of treatment and access to it, getting to it, as you know, with transportation. So this would be very good and would fit very nicely with our community development. Because if we're going to improve our communities here in St. Lawrence County, we've got to deal with this substance abuse issue. I think this goes a long way to do that. So, Mr. Chairman, once again, I thank you all for the opportunity to speak.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Do we have any questions or comments that anybody would like to address to Mr. Courier at this time? Apparently not. I think you did a great job, and thank you very much for taking the time to present to us.
Thank you.
So today, the CSB did meet, and what I'm told is reported to me by the chairman. I don't know, Mr. Chairman, would you actually like to do the report?
Sure. I had a conversation with the chairman of the Community Services Board this afternoon. And to make a long story short, they had a meeting where a vote was taken on who would be the operator of any methadone clinic that this board chose to initiate and fund and see operating in St. Lawrence County. They ran into a little problem in that, much like our board, we need a majority of the board to pass a resolution at our board meetings. They have the same requirement. They have a 13-member board, which requires that they have 7 affirmative votes in order to pass a resolution at a called board meeting. They did not meet that test today, I should say. They came up a little bit short. They had a couple of abstentions because of locations where the members of the board are employed, and they rightfully so recused themselves. So they came up short on the numbers. There is a plan, according to the Community Service Board Chair, that they will attempt to address and have a vote again sometime within the next few days, whenever a meeting can be convened in order to accomplish that. They spent some time with myself and with the county attorney on the phone today, trying to do it right, I guess, for lack of a better term. But I'm not sure when the next meeting will be. That will be up to that board. And at that time, when they have that meeting, hopefully they'll have sufficient numbers there to have a legal vote and pass a resolution.
Mr. Arquette.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm hoping that our liaisons to that board will make very clear some of the concerns and opinions that Mayor Currier just shared with us. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? So I have been informed that all 6 members that were eligible to vote did vote in favor of St. Lawrence Health Systems as the recipient of this, of the grant. And because of, there was only 6 and not 7, we would need a motion to table this resolution. And I believe that we could table it to the board meeting next Monday in hopes that the CSB is able to get 7 members. I think it was difficult for them. People do have jobs and couldn't leave their jobs and Zoom in. So hopefully we'll have an answer. So I would entertain a motion to move. I'm sorry, Mr. Forsythe, would you like to make this?
Well, can we just, you said 6 of the voting members voted?
I believe, is that correct, Mr. Lightfoot?
That's correct.
Well, last week we talked about getting this moving it forward. Is there a reason we still can't move it forward? Obviously, there's only 5 other ones to vote.
Well, they would need 1 more affirmative, or actually, even if it was 6-1, I think it would move forward. I would defer to Mr. Button on this matter.
I don't understand why we're waiting.
As to whether or not, as to why you are waiting, normally this board has a great degree of authority over the selection and choices made by its advisory boards, the Community Services Board being an advisory board whose members are appointed by this board. However, the grant as drafted indicated specifically that the Community Services Board would be the party that would solicit applications, would make certain selections associated with the third-party providers that would ultimately end up rendering the services under the OTP. As a result of that, with respect to the submission we made to the federal government, we actually identified that the Community Services Board would select the appropriate authority. When you get to the authority of a local government unit, which the LGU or the CSB in this situation has to act, they are constrained by the same rules that we are as a local government. That being that in order to pass something affirmatively at a full board meeting, they must have a majority of the members of all seats capable, not of those merely present. While they had 11 members present, 2 abstained. Of the 9, it's my understanding it was a 6-3 vote, but 6 would still fall short of a majority of 13 seats. They would need 7 in order to have a majority of the full body. Unfortunately, they didn't have it.
Okay, because I heard that there was only 6 that were there present, so, okay.
Even if they had 6 though, and this was the example I sort of laid out to the Community Services Board chair. I said, if you had 8 people come to your meeting, 13 people being the total body,
Right,
you would still need to have 7.
right, I understand, okay,
So
I got that. It just, I had heard there was 6 that voted and 2 that abstained. 6-0, it doesn't sound like anyone's gonna budge, so just move forward and let's get it going if we're gonna do it, so, all right.
So I think we have to follow the law. It requires a 7-vote majority. I'm sorry, Ms. Terminelli?
I just am wondering for the timeline of accepting the grant and not having an actual date set for the Community Services Board to meet again. Are we able to amend this resolution to accept the grant and then do a separate resolution to award it to the recommended agency, just so that Jay or the county is able to accept the grant at this point?
Well, we do have Mr. Aldrich with us. Jay, could you respond to the acceptance of the grants, the timing of this? Is it a separate, is there a deadline for the acceptance of the grant?
Well, we haven't got any official nod from the Department of Justice in terms of, signing a contract at this point, but so I don't really know what the turnaround is on that. I do have to go into the portal for, they have a new system called Just Grants. I'm waiting to see how that, I guess, striation of authority with the Just Grants program fits within the county. If there's going to be someone assigned to, kind of be the point person for that in case there's more than one justice grant within the county. I'm not sure if I'm going to be that point person or if that would be someone that's going to be delegated by the county to be the point person in that portal. So
certainly, I think that was a great question, Ms. Terminelli, excuse me, I was hiccuping at the same time. So it doesn't look like the deadline is going to be like in 48 hours, or I think if we can move this forward, if there's a resolution to table, we can move this towards the board meeting. Hopefully we would have an answer. If we don't have an answer from the Community Services Board, we can table it to Operations or Services. Would anybody be interested in making that tabling? Ms. Curran, second by Mr. Forsyth and Mr. Lightfoot. There is no discussion on tabling. All those in favor of tabling this resolution into the board meeting, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Any opposed? Okay, so that's been carried. We do have a need for executives. I'm sorry?
Can I-
Yes, okay.
Just to get back to you, I did mention when my budget report about the total in the employee recognition program. I was able to find that total. It's $4,855.79. So I did want to make you aware of that. I did communicate some interest in planning something for highway. So we'll be looking to do that as well as a few other departments. So we'll keep in contact with you about that. And lastly, if there's no objection, now that the Board of Legislators has the 2021 tentative budget, we will announce and schedule a public hearing for Monday, November 2nd, which is the board meeting at 5:45 for consideration of the 2021 tentative budget. That's all.
Thank you. So we do have the need for executive, I'm sorry, Mr. Burke, go ahead.
I have a question for Jay before he leaves. Jay, just out of curiosity, I know you and Shayna and I think Heidi Ames were involved in writing the grant. What kind of resources, what kind of county resources are we talking in that process? And what's our obligation regardless of who gets the grant? Jay, are you there?
The person hours that were put in.
Sorry.
Can you hear me?
And now.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it's hard to determine the number of person hours that were put into, the creation, and the writing of the grant. It was not only, my department, but it was also the planning department, and also Mike Cunningham, had some involvement with the RFP. So, but I would say that there's probably a good $1,000 or more that have been invested by the county into the implementation of submitting this grant.
Mm-hmm. And the requirement, Jay, from the, I assume because the grant was awarded to, at least in the name of the county, what's our obligation for the duration of the grant?
Well, it's a 3-year grant, and depending on what the contract looks like with the county and the agency that's appointed to implement the grant, it could possibly, be treated as a pass-through money that would go through the LGU office, which is comprised of myself, our fiscal officer, and our secretary. So those vouchers for repayment of expenses that were incurred during the initiation and execution of the grant would have to be you'd have to gather up the invoices and the payroll records and things like that to show proof of expenditure, and that would have to then subsequently be submitted to the Department of Justice.
And if there's a problem in the implementation of the program, do we come into that? If it wasn't awarded to the county, do we come into the mix?
Well, I mean, it is a county grant. Again, it depends on the contract, how it's set up. If the contract's going to be, totally subawarded to the chosen entity, and the county, somehow is not involved in that process, I think, either way, because it was first awarded to a county and then it was given as a subaward to another recipient, that the county would share some responsibility in making sure that the grant was executed as written.
Thanks, Jay. Thank you.
Yep.
Jay, that would be a requirement of any entity that the pass-through funds go through that you're responsible for. Would that be correct?
Correct, but we do get state aid for LGU administration to help cover those costs. We would not get that in this instance.
Mrs. Hyder, do you have your hand up?
You are so observant, Mr. Chairman. I did. So if the county were not to get the methadone clinic, let's say hypothetically, would the entity pay us for the work that's been done?
Is that directed towards?
Go ahead, Jay. I'm sorry.
I don't know. Was that directed towards me?
I direct the question to the chairman, but I'm not sure who could answer that question.
I'm going to give you I watched these debates, and I don't do hypotheticals. That would be my standard answer.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. But I mean, it doesn't seem right. We talk about spending taxpayers' money, and if it were not to go to the county, wouldn't that be our county employees doing work to benefit another entity?
Well, I think with the grant writing that Heidi Ames does, she does it for several departments. I don't think it's not like the planning department is writing grants for itself. So I think, we're all in this together. We're all working together. I know there'd be a time commitment. I mean, Jay could answer this for the administration of actually doing the work. And maybe there's, we don't have the grant in front of this, so I don't know what the ramifications are. Jay will need to look at this and see what the stipulations of this grant are. I believe that some of the money would have to go towards peer advocates, some of it would have to go to the Grace House. It's not all money that would be spent if it was St. Joseph's, St. Lawrence Health Systems, or the county. So I think it needs to be distributed, and that's why it required a vote in the Community Services Board. But this is all preliminary information that once the grant is here, that'll be Jay's can explain that to us and how it's being done.
I think Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Sure.
Thank
Go
you.
ahead.
I guess what I'm saying is if, for example, it were to go to St. Lawrence Health Systems, St. Lawrence County has done the work to put this together. So we would give them the $900,000 plus all the work that was put in free, right?
But I don't, Jay could answer this, I don't know what work the county would, we don't even know what the work of the county would take place. It's 900,000 over 3 years, you know. Maybe Mr. Lightfoot could answer this, he's been much more involved than I.
Mrs. Haggard, I would think that this is a competitive grant, and there are many more that probably have applied for it. I know that this 900,000 is not the only award, but I would think that once a grant is awarded, it's awarded to the successful applicant, if you will. And those that were not successful, I would assume that they are done with it. That has been my limited knowledge of what happens with grants. And I can't imagine that it would be any different here. And if the situation were reversed, would we honor a request from St. Lawrence Health Systems to recover their costs if it were a different story? So that would be my response. I'm not saying that is the correct response. It's what my experience has been with grants.
Mr. Forsythe.
Isn't there normally an administrative feature added into these grants? I know we had the septic grant years ago. The county drew up the plan, the planning department drew it up for the septic systems. And then I went to the general contractors that did the work, and there was no administration amount for it. Well, we've done the work, but it helped behoove the people that had the septic problems. So I don't understand the rationale.
So Soil and Water actually donated, I forget the amount of money. 50,000? 15,000 for the, help cover the administrative costs. And I think, John, we had the same conversation in Soil and Water, and I guess there's money left over.
Yep.
And so they've asked Soil and Water to contribute again, and we are willing to do so.
We just do it as a team, and I'm sure there's others I'm not thinking of, but I know that one right off the top, so, all right.
So we do have the need for executive session, is all 4 categories?
One more question,
Oh, I'm sorry, John.
Kevin.
Yes, go ahead, John.
If I could, one more statement. Just a reminder that it's not just the $900,000 for the grant. It's our projections, the county projections, is close to $1 million in revenue over the first 2 years. It's money that would. So it's the 900,000, close to $1 million in revenue. It's money that would stabilize the operations of community services in general. It's taxpayer money. The 900,000 and the projected revenues are taxpayer revenues. So, at least in my mind, you know, if we allow this to go to another entity, it's synonymous with writing a check for close to $2 million over the first 2-year period. That's my belief, and again, I don't know how we could possibly consider it or be part of it to take that kind of revenue away from our taxpayers. It's important to have the services. Certainly no reflection on either of the other applicants. St. Joe's and St. Lawrence Health are good organizations. But again, we don't work for them. We work for the taxpayers of St. Lawrence County. And it's again synonymous with writing a check out for that money. And even worse than that, it is an indictment of our own services and their future. I mean, I don't know how long Messina could continue if part of their current clientele is eroded by another program opening up. You know, these are all issues that we don't talk about, but my big concern is that all these resources are taxpayer resources, and we should treat them exactly as that and guard them as we do every other dollar that we spend.
Okay, I'm going to make a few comments in response, and then we're going to move into the executive session. We know in 2020 that the county cost is $1.5 million. Projections for the 2021 budget are $1.4 million. We wrote off $900,000 this year, and that goes up to 2017. It's projected that we're going to have write-offs of uncollected monies of $275. Those are all taxpayer dollars. So let's move into executive session. What categories?
Negotiations, litigation, and personnel.
Okay, so A, B, and C, moved by Mr. Forsythe, seconded by Ms. Curran and Mr. Smithers. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Okay. Move adjourned by Mr. Reagan, seconded by Ms. Curran and Mr. Smithers. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Hi.
Aye.